Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, February 24th, 2025, and the time now is 6 p.m., and I will call to order this regular meeting of the Town of Mead Board of Trustees. In accordance with the town's remote participation and remote meeting policy adopted by the Board of Trustees on March 13th, 2023, by Resolution Number 21-R-2023, remote participation will be allowed. The meeting link has been provided on the town's website, designated posting place 24 hours prior to this meeting. I'd like to remind everyone present, both in person and virtually, of the town's general guidelines for public comment at open meetings and public hearings. The guidelines are available online and on the entry table. There are 2 public comment opportunities on the agenda for persons in attendance at Town Hall to address the board. The first is limited to items on the agenda, and the second public comment opportunity allows any subject, whether it is on the agenda or not, to be addressed. Mary, roll call, please.
Mayor Whitlow.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris.
Here.
Trustee Adams.
Here.
Trustee Babcock.
Here.
Trustee Crane.
Here.
Trustee Hagan.
Here.
Trustee Schranz.
Here.
Mayor Whitlow, today is Monday, February 24th, 2025, and you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. During this Women's History Month, please join me in a moment of silence for all of the women who have contributed to the growth and strength of our nation. Thank you very much for your time. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 4, which is a review and approve agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
I'd like to pull item E off of the agenda. Of the consent agenda, excuse me.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yes, I'd like to pull item I and also at least ask council whether we can discuss ongoing litigation during our executive session. I've asked for an update on anything the town's involved in a couple different times and it's been delayed. So I just want to, if we're going in the executive session, we could widen it to include any discussion of ongoing cases.
We only have one active matter of litigation right now, and I have a conference call scheduled later this week with our counsel handling that litigation, so I won't really have an update for you until after that conference. So I would suggest that we do it at a future meeting.
So those of us new on the board haven't heard what the basis for the lawsuit is and what's the...
There's no hurry at all. The trial isn't scheduled until March of 2026, so we have a full year. We have plenty of time. We'll do it at a future meeting.
Okay, hopefully soon.
Okay, anything else on changing of the agenda? All right. May I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
I make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
I second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crane.
Yes.
Trustee Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris.
Yes.
Trustee Schranz.
Yes.
Trustee Hagan.
Yes.
Trustee Babcock.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. We have an agenda for this evening. Next is our staff report by our town manager. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. You have my report. There are a couple of things I'd like to add. First of all, thank you, Trustee Hagan, for bringing to our attention early enough on the item you wanted to pull from the agenda. So I asked Erica to put together just a little more than what's in the packet. So she'll be introducing that tonight. Also, I would like to mention that at the next board meeting, we're going to have a work session, and Lorelei is going to talk about some of our various employee engagement activities that we do here at the town of Mead. And before that, I just wanted to make this announcement of these particular employees. As you know, we changed the employee manual handbook this year. And we added in a few things, including years of service awards. So today, our new HR director handed out certificates, and there's a small monetary amount for each employee that hit these milestones. But I just wanted to mention, we have Sergeant Ellis in the police department, just hit 6 years. Bo Hurtado in our Public Works Department, our operations manager, has been here 6 years. Dino Korecki, who's one of our construction inspectors, has been here 5 years. I've been here 9 years. I just hit my 9th year anniversary. Lorelei Nelson, our communications director, has been here 5 years. Chief Newbanks has been here 6 years. And Erica Rasmussen, our Public Works Director, has been here 7 years. And then rounding it up is Mary Strutt, who's been here 10 years. So I just thought I'd bring that to your attention because it's exciting that that these people have chosen to be a part of our team for this long. So, and that's all I have for additions to my report.
Any questions or comments for Helen? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much for your report. Okay, we'll move on to our informational items. The first one is our 2025 wastewater review rates and PIF study review and update by our town engineer, Public Works Director, Erica Rasmussen. Ma'am, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, trustees. We have here tonight our consultant, Andrew Ream from Raftellus, who has a presentation for you tonight of his analysis of our sewer rates. The last one was in 2022, and some of the conditions have changed since that time. So it's time to reevaluate that. Inflation changed considerably after COVID. The growth patterns here have changed a little bit. Our capital projects have changed. So it's a good time to take a look at that. And then we do have an additional item on the agenda tonight. It was on consent. Now we'll discuss it, but that would be implementation of the rates recommended, because those do go into effect on March 1st. So we need to finalize those in order to implement them. So with that, I will turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Erica, and thanks for having me tonight. I've got a bit of a brief presentation and certainly some, additional slides and whatnot if some additional questions come up. So just a little bit. All right, there we go. Working. The company I work for, Raftellus, we've been assisting Mead with wastewater fund financial planning, rates and fees, going back to outcome of an RFP process in 18 kind of time period. The first comprehensive study was completed by us with results implemented in 2019. And as was indicated in the memorandum, we did an update around 2022. There was an additional kind of industrial customer that had approached the town about basically connecting to the system for wastewater treatment. They kind of had their own pipes. And I know there's been some changes and some nuances to that, but that's one of the things that prompted the 21-22 study. And depending on the pace of growth, which was pretty robust that period of time, there were questions about timing of the expansion or the next expansion of the treatment facility. And so all of that was covered in that 21-22 update. And then again, we were brought in to look at this update and factor in more recent cost information. I'll talk a little bit about the study objectives, but this is a very typical type of study that I work on or others within my company work on. As you can see, we've got certainly a strong history and presence within Colorado, up and down what I call kind of the I-25 front range. Just a few communities we've worked with in the last few years: St. Vrain Sanitation District, Town of Berthoud's back a couple more than that. Firestone, Tacona, Wellington, Greeley. Longmont goes back a little bit further, Eaton and Erie, just to name a few. And those are just kind of, in between, right around this area of similar types of studies, maybe water side, maybe water and wastewater, in the case of the town, wastewater. So this is kind of stuff I do every day. In terms of the agenda for tonight, just really at a high level, the study, as well as some of the things that when we complete these financial planning overviews, how we complete them, and what we're looking for in terms of, and ultimately what drives rate recommendations. We'll look a little deeper into the town's wastewater fund financial plan and rates that we're proposing. We're forecasting a little further beyond what the request is for formal action, being the initial or 2025 recommendation for water, and then a 2-year schedule for the one-time plant investment fees, which I'll talk about next. And certainly any kind of questions or discussion, one of the reasons I'm here is for that as well. So with that as a bit of a backdrop, what were our objectives for the study? There were twofold. And on one side was an assessment of the financial plan and looking at about 10 years. These types of evaluations, and particularly with utility funds, the capital plan and how far that goes out and how recent it's been updated can be a bit of a driver, since the long range planning on the wastewater treatment facility goes back a few years. We're really focusing on this initial 5-year period, but we're also looking out and planning for that expansion, which now we think is going to be beyond this 5-year period. Previously, we were thinking we're going to have to expand it earlier. As growth slowed down, we can use the capacity we have for longer and kind of push out that expansion. The exact timing of that is, hard to tell, but at least preparing for that is one of the drivers. But really, in that initial 5-year period is more of the focus. Objective, was really evaluate the impact on the fund of cost inflation. It's been inflation has increased at a higher rate, one that we were forecasting in the 21 study. And so as those higher costs have accumulated, does that impact the rates? And the previous rate recommendations we had, say for 25 and 26, within that completed 21 study. Ultimately, with updated information, we're forecasting costs, revenues, and assessing, the question, do we need to increase rates? And if so, how much and when? And the driver there is just a bit of a reminder. This is an enterprise fund that doesn't receive any tax funding. So it's fully self-sufficient with the rates and fees that are assessed for wastewater services. So as say costs have increased, it's contained within that fund itself, and we're not pulling in funding from other sources outside of the enterprise fund. So it really does need to stand on its own, both and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a slide to come. The second kind of element was updating the one-time plant investment fees. Again, this is something that we've looked at over the last couple of studies, and really the question of, as there's been reinvestment in the wastewater utility and inflation, kind of that current replacement cost is higher, what does that mean for the plant investment fee? The town has been indexing and increasing that annually since our previous study, but for an index that sometimes doesn't pick up or reflect as much the costs that we're really seeing on the ground. It's better than not adjusting it, but these a little bit more in-depth evaluations better assess kind of that question, is the index maintained or kept up with both the reinvestment as well as what we're seeing on the ground. So that's that second question we're asked to answer and got an answer as far as what that plant investment fee would need to be to fully recover the costs of the system we have today. So in terms of the overall process we went through, it's as I said earlier, it's a pretty common approach that we use for communities, small and large throughout the country and throughout Colorado. It starts with baseline information. That's really what we ended up updating. What is our adopted budget for 2025 for the fund? How many customers do we have today? What kind of growth are we anticipating? we picked up and incorporated some additional revenue streams that have been added as the town's passing along some costs associated with the lift station. So we've incorporated those, in terms of the overall funding stream to offset some additional costs that the town has in managing and maintaining that system. How much cash do we have? And then we marry that with some of the criteria we have for rate setting, how we anticipate funding some of our one-time capital projects, again, over this 5 to 10 year period. And we bring it all through a cash flow analysis. And, we complete some internal, some alternatives, some what ifs, but ultimately it's a bit of an iterative process, and we land on an outcome and a base plan as we did as part of this update. Sometimes there's more moving pieces. I'd say the capital is relatively straightforward, with kind of the big capital question hanging out somewhere in this 10-year period of when the treatment facility may need expansion, and what it will cost, and how to finance that. We sort of that was the big project. The rest of the projects, as we've historically funded with cash, and that's what we're anticipating. Much smaller improvements or repair and replacements at the wastewater treatment facility, as well as some replacements of aging pipes in the system. So as we look at this question of, how much revenue may we need and when, there's really 3 goals that we have. The first one is to fund our expenses. As I said earlier, this is an enterprise fund, so our user charges, revenues, and then accumulated cash reserves are the tools we have to fund our expenses. And then to some degree, as we look at capital funding or significant projects where it makes sense, maybe some external debt, or if we're able to get a grant to fund those. So this incorporates recurring operation and maintenance. We've got some existing debt and debt service obligations, and then those cash funded capital expenses that I referenced earlier. So, at the end of the day, we've got a utility to run and run like a business. So as our costs go up, that's one of the drivers, certainly, that results in the need to adjust rates or adjust rates higher than otherwise we may want to do. There's some other criteria that we have, and sometimes people think of enterprise funds that gets down to $0 at the end of the year, and we recover exactly to the penny the cost in that year. While that's true over the longer term, we do have some cash reserves and some minimums that, like a business, we don't want to fall below, working capital as well as some emergency reserves. So we've got some criteria. The first is a 90-day or 25% of our operation and maintenance expenses. And this is really just working capital. Like any business, we've got we bill for a service, we pay for it in terms of our costs, and then we collect it from our customers. In this case, really after that service has been provided. So we give ourselves a little bit of working capital to manage those kind of ebbs and flows where our expenses don't always line up exactly with how our revenues come in throughout the year. We've got a second component that's a capital reserve. It's a little bit more of an emergency kind of cash on hand in case something were to break where outside of our plan, or a current project costs a little bit more than what we're anticipating. It gives us an additional cash reserve for capital to draw on. And following the previous study and similar questions, we had landed on a reserve of about $300,000. So as the cost of what $300,000 gets you is kind of eroded a bit, as well as looking at what we're anticipating in terms of multi-year capital and cash funded capital. We're proposing to raise that up to $400,000, and we're kind of phasing that in over a couple of years. Again, this gives us a floor. We've got more cash than both of these now, so it just helps us as we look out, and at what point do we want to kind of, where do we run out? And so we put a bit of a false floor in there. There's a second restricted sort of revenue stream, if you will, that we're also restricting within the wastewater fund. And this comes from TAP or plant investment fee revenues. Those one-time charges that are restricted for growth-related improvements and restricted fully for capital, but we want to keep for growth-related improvements. So to the extent that we're generating revenues from our TAP fees above our current growth-related costs, which does happen, we're kind of cordoning those off so that then when we go do that expansion, we've built up at least some cash to cash fund a big portion of that next significant growth related expense. In the meantime, we do have some growth related expenses, but we're sort of cordoning that off. And in another way, we're not dependent on whether or not those plant investment fee revenues come in a given year for purposes of, O&M and some of the other capital expenses we have. And that helps with the stability of these cash reserves, as well as just managing and running this type of a business with some ebbs and flows year over year. The last criteria is referred to as the debt service coverage requirement or ratio. And this is really a covenant or part of the loan agreement, both the existing debt the town has and the wastewater fund has, I should say more directly. And it's a covenant or requirement of future debt. And, in simple terms, this means for every dollar in annual debt service that we have, for our legal requirements, we need to have $1.10 in revenues after our operation and maintenance expenses, but before our capital expenses to pay that debt service. We target a higher ratio or a higher target for financial planning and rate setting purposes. That is at that 1.5 times annual debt service. And as we'll, generally we're well above kind of our minimums on this with the debt that we have. It's certainly something that we track. It doesn't also include those one-time plant investment fee revenues. So we look at it both with and without the plant investment fee revenues. Sometimes growing communities can rely a little too much on those, even for making annual coverage. And if, as some communities kind of experienced during the Great Recession about 15 years ago, if growth falls right away, then there may have been some reliance on it and rates kind of have to catch up. So we look at both of those and then with an eye as well out to the future. And as we're looking at issuing potential debt into the future, we want to maintain capacity to take on that debt. So those are the three criteria for rate setting. In terms of more directly some drivers for the town's wastewater fund, I list this first one as wastewater entity, the regulatory requirements and maintaining sufficient capacity to serve current and future customers in the near term. That's sort of a base requirement. It's sort of any system needs to meet this, and the town system does and will so in the future. But this is kind of one of the base drivers, and what that means to meet that is one of the drivers and requirements here. As I've spoken about once or twice already, we've had increases in costs across the board, whether it's labor, insurance, benefits, materials, supplies that affect recurring operation and maintenance, future capital, some stuff that we built, and then to the extent that we're going to borrow money, also the interest rates. So fortunate, we're not trying to borrow money right now, so we can kind of maybe wait out. Maybe interest rates will come down a bit, but the capital and O&M, those costs, those increased costs, we're certainly seeing come through. And ongoing repair and replacement of the wastewater treatment facility, as well as the collection system, is also a driver, and to some degree, as costs have increased, that's affected what those future costs are, as well as just the age and condition of the facility. Things just wear out and need to be replaced, or get a little bit older and start to break down. We've experienced a little slower growth the last couple of years. There was a pretty significant growth within both the town as well as the wastewater fund. And I should have mentioned it earlier, but the town's wastewater utility serves about a third of the overall town. So within our kind of wastewater utility, that period we were adding a decent amount of customers. It since sort of tailed off in 23 and 24. So we're growing not quite as fast as we were. And what that means is, our economies of scale on a relatively small utility, we just aren't adding customers as fast as we anticipated. Last time we were looking at the similar rate forecast, things we have are costing more. And there's also that additional and kind of industrial development that is developing slower than what was anticipated as well. Now, as I understand it, there's a road coming in the next year or two. So there's, there's some thought that that will kind of restart things or initiate a little more development there once that road is in place. But for the time being, we're at a couple of customers and, just haven't added those additional lots, haven't developed quite this way that they were looking to develop when we were evaluating this a few years ago. And the kind of final one is we look at levelizing our annual rate revenue adjustments with a near term, medium term in mind, but we don't want to wait and do nothing and then have a huge spike, or certainly increase and decrease rates along the way. So we try and find a bit of a level environment and either build up or maybe 2 or 3 years out. And in this case, say a 6% rate increase for a few years, we're right at the spot we want to be out 2 or 3 years. So these are some of the drivers, in terms of this update, one that kind of sort of initiated it, as well as just as we looked out in that 5 to 10 year period, what we were seeing and some of those challenges. So I'm going to switch to a little bit more of the details of the financial plan. As I mentioned earlier, we did look out 10 years, but our eye was really more in this initial period through 2029. So one of the big drivers for any utility, any wastewater utility or utility is what do the capital costs look like over this multi-year period? And so 2025 included some things in the budget that we were maybe anticipating starting last year, and they got pushed a little bit in their timing. But many of these are somewhat miscellaneous or a handful of smaller scale improvements at the wastewater treatment facility, and they've been prioritized. And so based on the timing shown in this bar chart, we're doing some additional reinvestment in the next few years, and then it's anticipated fall back a little bit to fewer projects. So over this planning period, we've got about $2.1 million in improvement. Its average is about $400,000 a year. But you can see it sort of ebbs and flows, and we're drawing from reserves a little bit earlier on, and then starting to replenish them when we get into the 28, kind of 29 time periods. And as we look out, that expansion is maybe just beyond this time horizon. So we'll see, we're accruing some cash, and then depending on that timing, that expansion, we'll use a portion of that to cash fund part of the expansion, as well as those tap fee revenues we've been cordoning off. So what does this mean for a typical residential customer? The rates the town has, there's a couple, kind of a low and medium residential fixed charge. This reflects the medium residential fixed charge, which incorporates up to 4,000 gallons of that sort of billed wastewater, winter water use. And with the proposed rates that have been developed for 25, it adds about $3 a month for that customer. As shown here, it takes that up to $53 from $50. And then we're forecasting what translates to a 6% adjustment in 26 through 29. So for a typical customer, that ends up being an increase of about $3 a month for each of those adjustments. And then just a little bit of kind of rounding, if you will. We're showing this to the nearest dollar. The 6% sort of compound, so it's closer to $4 a month in 28 and 29. Just, certainly keep in mind, we're forecasting beyond what we're asking for in terms of 25. But again, we're looking a little bit further than just sort of 1 year at a time as part of that levelization. So debt service coverage with the existing debt, we're exceeding our minimums with that. But ultimately, what the driver ends up being is cash reserves. And so early on, you see we're above our minimum target. And then as we incorporate, kind of this capital reserve and step that up, we get a little bit closer to 27, where we're basically right at target in 28. And then we end up with a little bit above that. Now, you may be wondering, why is the green line going up? Well, that's going up as we've got some of those plant investment fee revenues being restricted, and some of the development that we're projecting within the Radorink and Postal developments are coming in starting in 27. So we're generating those tap fees, but then we're cording them off. And as we've got the expansion coming potentially in that next 5-year period, that's where we're using those fully before we use other cash within the system to cash fund a portion of that expansion. So how does this compare to other sewer utilities nearby? And so we pulled this together with, some of the systems, or at least in the city of Longmont, it's quite a bit bigger, but it's close by. And similar for Berthoud. We've got, again, this is the residential user with 4,000 gallons, that snapshot. And kind of where does Mead fall in today? A little bit towards the front end of this group. We've got kind of a simple average of everybody else at about $40 a month. And then under the proposed, we kind of tick up a little bit. But keep in mind, we're well within the range of others. And, some of these are a little misleading, and they can be a snapshot, as well as we're looking backwards. And so, many of these same communities are evaluating or will be evaluating these kind of similar questions. I know Berthoud's going through a comprehensive rate study this year. It started a little bit earlier. Well, there's 2 parts to it. Eaton's also looking at things. They haven't really adjusted much on the sewer side. Eaton's had much more significant increases on, say, the water side. And the other thing to keep in mind, at least for the case of St. Vrain's Sanitation District, is they've got some other funding streams they use. And pretty much everybody else has a bigger blend of commercial and residential, kind of more of a mix, where the town of Mead's almost exclusively a residential wastewater system. So all those kind of come into bear in terms of, one, the economies of scale, or with commercial, you've got bigger users to help share in the burden versus a primarily residential system. You've just got less significant users to share in those same costs. So that kind of covers how we compare on this side of things. I'm going to switch into the plant investment fee portion of the presentation, and got a few slides there, and then we'll close up and certainly take any questions or comments. So what are these? And, I kind of throw these terms around a lot, but these are one-time fees that are assessed to new or increased development. Quite often by meter size, water meter size is the case for the town of Mead's wastewater plant investment fees. There's a lot of different names. I use them somewhat interchangeably, but you may see, other communities assign one of these names, or even one that's not on the list. These types of fees are based on the impact of new development in terms of their impact on the system. And, they should reflect the unit cost of the facilities that new development is reasonably anticipated to either use or require. We can use them for debt service. We can use them for capital costs, but we cannot use them for operation and maintenance costs. And it's certainly very common in the West. They provide a better kind of equity balance between new and existing customers. Communities that don't have these types of one-time fees, effectively the ratepayers are financing expansions to the system, and then get at some kind of future benefit and lower rates as those new customers join in. There's some case law and some statutory guidance, but basically, if there's reasonably tied to the impact of the new development is the standard. It's not that individual development, but the sort of class of users or expected users. So as we looked at this in our study in 21-22 and in 2019, we had a pretty good base, and we updated. And in this case, we really looked at the existing system assets. So in past evaluations, the timing of the future expansion was part of it, but we kind of looked at both, and they come to a similar result. But in this case, this really reflects just the existing replacement cost of the wastewater system as best as we can estimate today. And there's a small portion, we've got some debt and debt service, and that debt has a growth related portion to it. So there's some element of those costs included as well, and as part of this 19.4 million. So that's one part of the calculation, is the value of the system. The other part is how many we can serve, or what is the capacity to serve those customers. So the 500,000 gallon per day capacity that we have, based on how we design the system, can serve roughly 2,350 equivalent residential customers. So from there, once we figure out A and B, the math's pretty easy. And maximum supportable fee of roughly $8,200 per equivalent residential connection kind of falls out of that. So we had some kind of cumulative replacement costs that are being reflected in this that we weren't picking up in the indexing. And that's translating to roughly a 21% increase if we were to do this kind of in one step. As we talked about this with town staff, and, with the March 1 effective date, we thought it better to phase this over 2 years. So we kind of split it in half. We're anticipating some inflation in 26. And so ultimately, what we're proposing, rather than one step, is 2 steps to get there. And you can see the current fees that start out with that base meter size of a 5/8 inch water meter up to a 3-inch water meter. And those 2 years of fee changes translating to roughly 12.5% increases each year. Keep in mind, the vast majority of the connections we have on the system, that we get on the system, are that first fee level. So sometimes, the bigger fees, people can be drawn to, say, the 3-inch and the dollar amount. We have very few of those new connections. I don't even know how many existing we may have. So just keep that in mind, that it's really that 5/8 inch fee and the $850 and $950 that most new customers will be paying, and certainly almost all residential, unless there's some sort of multifamily setup. So how do these compare? Same entities we were looking at in terms of the rate side. And again, this is a typical residential kind of base sewer connection. Many same communities assess this based on water meter size. So the range is a little bit bigger. You got Severance at $15,000 for a sewer tap fee, excuse me, or play investment fee. One of the bigger ones I've seen. And kind of what their drivers may be, who knows. And Eaton, kind of the lower end, it's been at $3,000 for a real long time for Eaton. So a little bigger of a range, but when we kind of average this or normalize this, the average without Mead is about $7,500. Got a couple outliers, but most are in that kind of $6,000 to $9,000, $8,500 kind of window. And today, Mead's a little bit maybe on the lower end, towards the middle of this comparable spectrum. And these 2 steps are highlighted. That first step in 25 kind of takes us up a little bit right around that middle. And then if the proposed 26 are implemented, it really puts us on par with St. Vrain. St. Vrain is likely, not really competitors, but in proximity, and they're also serving customers around the town's wastewater utility. So from a developer standpoint, they're probably going to look a little bit more, a little closer when they're comparing, should I build in St. Vrain or Mead? Well, by 2026, at least for the development fees, there isn't any difference. So with that, that's really that was the last of the kind of prepared base slides, and happy to go back a little earlier or answer questions or take comments.
Okay, we have him here, so let's ask him questions. So, questions, Brad?
How much is anticipated for the next plan expansion, the cost, and when was that modeled?
It was looked at pretty hard if you before, I want to say 2019, 2020. And that estimate was incorporated into that 21 update. There hasn't been that level of, design engineers going through and costing it. We did apply indexing to sort of bring it up to today's dollars. So within this plan, it's towards the end of the 10-year period, and between design and planning and construction, it is about do some quick math. About $12 million. It's soft estimate though. So the town's engineer would say, well, plus or minus, plus or minus.
Second question is, and this is might be for Erica and you, but has the downtown sewer lines been cleaned and cameraed, and is there like an anticipated life for some of these old sewer systems down here?
Yeah, we do clean the lines. We've split the town into 3 different basins. So we clean 1 basin a year. So there's never more than 3 years between cleanings. So, and we have had in the past, particularly in the downtown area, we have a cured in place pipelining project identified, and we have one in the budget for this year as well. So we have systematically been touching those older clay pipe systems to where I think this is the last year that we'll need to do that. And then we'll all have, the whole network will be, traditional pipe methods, not clay pipe anymore.
And the capacity is fine because they're just little collectors in the alley. So putting the plastic inside the carrier pipes is not reducing the capacity enough to impact anything.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the age of our sewer plant system? Whatever. This is a little out of my wheelhouse.
Was it 2013?
No, the plant was built in between 2006 and 2008.
Oh, it's maybe, I was thinking 13
Yeah.
years old, maybe. Yeah. But more than that now.
We're getting on 20 years, sounds like.
Okay. What is, let's see, how do I phrase this? What is the full capacity of what is there now? Like, are we really close? Are we really far away? Like, where are we at with capacity?
Yeah, so our plan is 0.5 MGD. So we're operating at about, I think, maybe in the 40 to 50%. Does that sound right, Andrew, as far as capacity?
It is, but there was a wet weather year in the past few years that had it above that. And so that's one of the variables that gets tracked.
Yeah. So I would say it's in the 40% range. And when we hit 80%, we need to be really actively pursuing that plant expansion.
Okay.
So there's a lot of inflow from groundwater, or what was the wet year comment?
Well, go ahead.
You remember when it rained for like 2 months straight? And so, we've done some metering to try to identify where we have some infiltration. And it doesn't seem like, on a consistent basis, we have a high level of infiltration. It was just an odd year, I think, that time.
Well, it's our go.
How often, I see that the last rate study or addendum rate study was 21-22. How often do we do rate studies?
Typically, I would say about every 3 years, but we did the one in 21-22 because of the whole addition to our 208 boundary for the Home Depot project and FedEx. So they actually paid to do the study because we needed to know how much it would harm or diminish the capacity of the plant.
Okay.
So when we did it, we looked at everything. But the reason why we're looking at it now, frankly, I attend a lot of different meetings, and I noticed that most places were raising their rates by at least the CPI because of the incredible inflation that's happened really since 2021. So we had a low rate increase, like 2% a year that we were predicting, but we were seeing CPIs of like 4%. So we knew we were low to begin with. And we also had some higher than expected costs. The capital projects that we were anticipating, we had to do them a little more aggressively. So it seemed intuitive that that we had more expense here that we weren't covering. So that's why we did the rate study.
So typically, we've been increasing 2% each year for years.
I wouldn't say typically. Andrew, can you?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of things. The 6% was the more kind of recent rate. And in the previous study, we had a 6% in that first year, and then it fell to 2%.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why is within the Home Depot and FedEx developments, we're anticipating adding those customers. And some of them, in terms of non-residential, can use a fair amount. So we're adding customers, helping with those economies of scale and seeing a 2% rate increase. So that was for a couple of years, we were at 2%, but one of the reasons was we were expecting to grow a little bit faster than what we actually ended up growing at.
Okay.
In that same period.
So again, I don't do sewer rate studies and sewer things every day, so I'm trying to wrap my head around it. But as a customer of 18 years, my sewer bills keep going up and up. But when we first moved here, they were 3 times what we were paying. Granted, a larger city. I moved from Centennial 18 years ago, and now we're looking at a 6%. And it's a lot to swallow. And I know I'm not the only one. And if you've moved here recently or you've been here for years, it just feels like it just keeps going up, and we're one of the highest. And now we're looking at a 6% increase every single year till 2029. Did I see that right?
That's what's being forecasted.
Yeah, I'm speechless because we keep doing these rate studies and we keep raising rates, and my clean water costs less than my sewer treatment. And I mean, I know it's gross water, but I'm just trying to figure this out because I've had other people also say, it just seems like our sewer bills are going up and up and up. And it's not just with this current craziness and inflation, it just keeps going up, and 6% seems insane. But so another question, that's kind of more of a statement, is with the, what is it called? The PIF. We're splitting that 21%, but we're actually making it 25%, but we're splitting that into 2 years. Those are brand new customers who aren't getting a bill every day or every month, who have to budget this in. Why wouldn't we just do that increase, get where we need to be for that? But those are super separate. So that's what I'm still trying to figure out. Like, they're separate. So we're like, those increasing aren't going to help us. When I first moved here, I was told because it was a big treatment plant and we didn't have all the rooftops. And so in essence, you're supporting it. Well, now we have more rooftops, but the rates just keep going up. So I'm just trying to understand so that I can also vote on a rate increase and know that I'm doing the right thing for all the residents out there that are sitting there going, it may only be $3 every month, every year, but it's a 6% increase every single year for the next 6 years. I don't know.
But I guess
what my questions are in there.
Well, it is. And unfortunately, when you see those rooftops, where have they been? Red Barn, Lakeside Canyon, none of these are in the
Sorrento? Are they in this?
Sorrento is, but Sorrento built out 2 years ago. So what like
Highlands?
the Highlands is, but the Highlands down to a couple building permits.
They have 9 left, yeah.
Yeah, and then we have Rangeview. Now, on the books, hopefully this year, we have Welker Farms, which is a fairly dense development on Welker. And then we have Westridge. Those would both be really big sewer users. So what you got to hope for.
Does that make our rates decrease?
Theoretically, it would, because that's what we were anticipating. We were anticipating more rooftops in our district, and also that the FedEx and Home Depots would multiply because
Right.
they pay a lot more for sewage treatment. So had we gotten the 4 or 5 buildings we had anticipated 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and we had gotten more homes in the sewer district, we would have been able to ameliorate some of the inflation.
Right.
We probably would be more at 4% or 3%.
Well,
But it's the cost of doing business.
the 6% that then went to 2%. Now that you say that, yes, I remember that because it was like, oh my gosh, the 6%. But then it went to 2%. But now we're at 6% and just go it. And then we're at,
Inflation.
I know, but you see our
Construction
rates are
costs, you know,
some of the
construction.
highest. Oh, I know everything. I mean, everything's gone up.
But we're not, I mean, you can look at the pro formas because you'll see when you pass the sewer budget every year, we're not stashing cash and sitting on it underneath the desk. I mean, we're keeping reserves that according to policy that we want to keep so that we're running the business as effectively, but responsibly, fiscally responsibly. So
So what, I guess then back to why wouldn't we just charge more for the PIF? If it's a brand new customer and Severance already charges a huge amount and even, we're not even close to that. Like what is the point of splitting that up? Wouldn't it behoove us to start getting the 25 or 21% increase now instead? Because it's not like you're affecting the residents' pocketbooks, the people who are trying to, put food on their table. It's somebody coming in and it's cost of construction going up.
I mean, there's really a choice there with it going into effect next month. The development and billing community generally,
They're
like they
developers.
budget stuff. They didn't budget for, kind of, if there was a longer lead time, 6 months, then that's the pushback that we typically get. And so it just seemed like, okay, let's split it in half. And to your comment, the 21 versus 25, we're factoring in anticipated inflation next year into that 2-year step. So that's why those percentages are different. But otherwise, it's just a little bit of a, I don't know, slower adjustment. And that whether it goes all in one or breaks over 2 years doesn't really impact the 2025 question of 6%. A little more money faster, but a lot of that, as Helen indicated, depends on when they can act and some of the other things. So that 2-year phase in is just a little softer adjustment versus something that go into effect in a few weeks.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
I don't have a question, but just more of a general discussion point. I was on the St. Vrain Sanitation Board back when Mead decided not to build a line down to St. Vrain Sanitation Treatment and to build their own facility. And it didn't make financial sense then. So should we look at potentially building that line before we do a plant expansion? So then at least our customers get the lower rates. The PIF might be higher, but combining in the state tries to get regional wastewater treatment. They don't like these little plants popping up. And we could get rid of a lot of lift stations because it's all gravity to St. Vrain. It always made sense to go there, but the old board wanted to keep control of the sewers so they could control the development. Because if you can't, they can deny or say we don't have service there or control the density by not having sewer near. So that was the thought then, and I don't think that's the same board anymore that we have here. So we might look at that.
yeah, and we actually, with the previous GM, Eric and I had those conversations early, like a couple years ago, about rather than expand our plant, would it make sense to even dissolve this Mead district and fully go with St. Vrain?
Yep.
Because of that very thing, the lower user rates.
Well, and there's all the mechanical parts that are going to need to be
Exactly.
replaced. All the little lift stations that we're trying to use to get it to our treatment plant because it all wants to flow that way and we're trying to force it that way.
Yeah, and as you probably know, our plant, we just made a decision, the board and our partners at North Front Range Water Quality, that it would just be a gravity-fed system until we allowed in FedEx. So that's our only lift station that we've allowed in. But to your point, before we expand this plant, we have to fully flush out, sorry, the pun, the idea of basically throwing in with St. Vrain. Because, we aren't really in the sewer business. So, but it's a great point. Great point.
Thank you.
I just have a question. I'm not sure if this is, I don't know. I'm not a sewer person either. Ooh, we're not the, this is just staff and actual, just general question. Do we have enough as the 400,000 moving forward with capital reserves? Is that going to be enough? Moving from 300 to 400,000.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you. Yes. Andrew, thank you very much for being here tonight. We appreciate all of the wonderful stories you have to share with us and all the wonderful inflation numbers you have to share with us. But I appreciate your time on a nice warm night that we've hadn't had for a long time. So,
Wow.
sir, thank you very much for your service to us, and thank you for your company for being with us.
Sure. Thank you. And as people will ask what I do, and it's hard to describe, I say, well, I am quite often the bearer of unwelcome news. So
You get paid the big bucks, right?
sometimes.
Thank you very much again. All right, we'll move on to our pavement management 5-year maintenance plan. This will be introduced and discussed with our pavement management program manager, Manny Windhorst. Sir, thank you very much for being here tonight, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and trustees. It's a pleasure to be here. Hopefully I have some exciting news. But from some of you new board members, so I'm going to give you a brief description and tell you a little story about myself. My name is Manny Windhorst. I've been doing this exact type of work for over 30 years. I've done it on a much larger cities. I used to work in the city of Las Vegas for 26 years doing this exact type of work. I used to work for Denver doing the exact type of thing, redoing roads. So I do live here in town, so I am local. I do drive our streets. And I have been employed at the town for 2 years. I've just passed my 2-year. So I am 100% intimately aware of what our roads and our conditions are. And I have one of the harshest critics that lives with me in my house. So I hear all of it. And I do have kids that drive on these roads. So when everybody's like, hey, we take a lot of heat sometimes on social media about when are we fixing the roads? When are we doing anything? I get it. And yes, I have a daughter, a son, and in exactly 4 weeks, 6 hours, I have another child going on my insurance and driving cars on our roads. Yeah. So I get it. I totally understand our roads. So you can be assured that I'm doing the very absolute best for all of us on our safety. You want to pull that thing up there for me. So we're going to kind of go through what this pavement management stuff is. All right. What is pavement management? Pavement management is the process of planning the maintenance and repair of a network of roadways to optimize pavement conditions over the entire network. And what that means is we want to get all the roads up to a nice place and they stay there. That is the goal. So we kind of have the ABCs of pavement preservation, the right pavement, what kind of condition, the right time, when do we do it, and what do we do to them? That is kind of the basis of what we do with pavement management. So what can we do? Some of the cheap stuff, we have crack sealing, which keeps water out of the asphalt. Asphalt is destroyed by water when it gets into the subgrade. We can chip seal it, which is pretty inexpensive. We just throw a quick surface down. It's waterproof, improves the skid resistance. Then we have a slurry seal, same kind of thing. It kind of waterproofs it, improves the skid resistance. And then we have like a cape seal, which is kind of a combination of the two. Those are kind of our cheaper options, but you can only use those when you are in a maintainable state. When you're maintainable, that's when you can use those. It's a lot cheaper. Unfortunately, this town is not in that kind of condition. So what do we use when we have more money? We have a hot in-place recycling. We have an asphalt overlay, a mill and overlay, and reconstruction. All those options are kind of at our disposal, and we're kind of more along the lines of the rehab in our town. So I pulled an old slide out of a assessment we had done back in 2020. And I remember looking at this years ago. And yeah, so I'm going to direct your attention to that curve on the side there. What that is a pavement deterioration curve. And what happens on the left side, you have when we pave a road, it's in excellent condition. It's brand new. It rides smooth. It's nice. Everything's fabulous. Everybody loves it. It's smooth. It's quiet. But as time goes on, that bottom line there, 4, 6, 12 years, that pavement deteriorates. And what causes that deterioration? Freeze thaw, truck traffic, overloaded farming equipment, overloaded beat trucks. You know, sometimes I see those beat trucks go through town. I'm like, they're way overloaded. How do you design for that? It's tough. They destroy our roads, but they were here first. We have to deal with that. So where was our town at 5 years ago? We were in a fair condition. Fair condition is not good. Fair is on that part of the curve where we're just kind of going off a cliff, where all of our roads are in bad shape. Everybody here knows that. We all live here. I live here. I know exactly what those roads are like, and they are kind of off the cliff. And that's in your best condition roadways. And they're built properly with the proper stabilization, the base and asphalt. That is what that pavement curve looks like. A lot of the town's streets were never constructed properly. They threw 2 inches of asphalt basically on just a farm road. You know, they were never designed properly. So we're kind of in that downhill mode fast. So here's kind of what that town looks like with that PCI. Anytime you see red or orange or anything, that's bad. And there's a lot of streets that are in really bad shape. And they went down so fast probably because they were never designed to what we should have had in the first place. Here we are. All we can do is what we can do now. I'm in the process of updating that. It's just me. Takes a long time when you have a big company with a bunch of people. It can get done quickly, but I'm slowly updating that, and it'll get updated every year because as we put money out there and maintain these streets, it changes basically every year. So we can have hope in that for sure. So let me give you a slight example of what it looks like to fix things. So if we have a mile of roadway, and that kind of interprets to, like, let's say from Welker and 3rd down to 66, or 66 down to the dreaded Mead High School. We all drive on that road and it's terrible. If we were to slurry and chip seal that, it's about 200 grand, lasts about 5 or 7 years. That's kind of what we did a few years ago. Doesn't last long, cracks immediately. If we were to mill and overlay a section of road like that, it costs about $500,000. That lasts 7 or 10 years. But the only way you can mill and overlay is you have to have the road constructed properly first. If you're only 2 inches of asphalt, you can't do a 2-inch mill and overlay. It just won't work. So sometimes that's not an option. We have very few roads that we can mill and overlay. And that's sad because it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot faster. I mean, in my head, I'm like, I just want to spend a whole bunch of money in 2-inch mill and overlay. Everything's brand new. But it's only gonna be brand new for 5, 6, 7 years. It immediately cracks. They did that on Colorado Boulevard a few years ago. The next year you can feel those bumps already, and they spent probably millions. I mean, I don't like to throw money in the trash. But unfortunately, like I said, there are very few roads we can do that to here. The most expensive option is reconstruction. I mean, we've had some stuff reconstructed. 2 years ago, we did North Creek, Hunter's Ridge. Last year, we did the Willows up there, Willow Drive, Feather Ridge. They're extremely expensive. They're $60, $70 a square yard. So that's kind of where a lot of our streets fall, is in that super expensive range. So now, as we are moving forward we have money and we're getting things done. So when we're looking forward to where we're going, we have to kind of look back to where we've been. So I spent a bit of time getting this map, and you guys have a copy there so you can kind of look at it. This shows everything that we've done since 2017. The records were a little sketchy before that, so this is kind of a map of what we did since 2017. And when you look at this map, there's a lot that was done. With the limited amount of funding we had, there was a lot done in town. A lot of slurry sealing, crack sealing, a lot of stuff has been done. But sometimes you don't notice because stuff doesn't last long. A few years in, it goes back to what it looked like before, especially on a roadway that was never constructed properly in the first place. Now, there's kind of a line here between 2022 and 2023. Everything before that was slurry and chip seal. After 2023, we have money to do some reconstruction. And why did that change? We all know why it changed, because we put a ballot measure. We got a 1% dedicated fund through a sales tax that generates some funds for us now. So instead of having a few $100,000 to do street maintenance, usually we're about 2 million or a little bit more. So we can actually do some real work now. So yeah, the previous to that 2021, there was a lot of work done, but it just doesn't last on those old streets. So that kind of, in this map, I'm going to kind of integrate it into our GIS system so we can update it every year. It just kind of gives us a rolling map of what has been done since 2017. Let me see here. So now here is what is kind of planned for the future. And getting these plans together are not easy. A lot of stuff sometimes is off limits. And I'm going to go through kind of a bullet point thing here about what I go through when I'm trying to figure out what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So one of the first things we have to deal with that I have to have is their development projects. Is the developer coming in? What are they doing? Where are they doing it? How are they doing it? So that's something that I have to look at. So the very first, if you go down here to County Road 7 and 28, I take a lot of flack about County Road 7. It's terrible. Yes, my wife drives on it. I drive on it. My kids drive on it. I have old trucks that I don't drive on it because I don't want to destroy them. But there's going to be a big development there. It's called Waterfront, and they are going to recondition that pavement basically from Liberty Ranch all the way down to the school and then all the way down County Road 28. So it doesn't make any sense for us to go spend any money down there to any huge degree because it's just going to get taken out. Makes no sense. So we just have to leave it there, which is a terrible option because it's one of the worst roads in town, but Waterfront is going to upgrade it. Another example that I would use for that, we have CDOT projects. We all know we have CDOT in town out on the highway, just not making our lives miserable, but sometimes when traffic gets detoured through town. So they are redoing our bridge out there, and it's going to be beautiful when it's done. And our Third and Welker project is going to get done, and it's happening right now. So one of the things we have to take into consideration is CDOT projects, town capital projects. And what do we have between those two projects? A really terrible road that nobody wants to drive on called County Road 34. So it wouldn't make any sense for us to have a perfectly new bridge and intersection with what we have in the middle. So there's another reason why we would do County Road 34. It just makes sense with the planning for everything else that's happening in the town. Now, town priorities, sometimes we have priorities in town that, what do we need done? The mayor asks us stuff. We have lots of complaints, pothole complaints, whatever. I have to take those into consideration. And there's also over here on the right side of the map is High Plains Boulevard. I paved a piece last year. I'm going to move back one slide and you can look on your previous completed map. Down there on County Road 32, there's a little piece of brand new pavement down there. Well, County Road 32 between High Plains Boulevard and the frontage road. That road is in bad shape. And when we have High Plains Boulevard coming in, I'm like, wow, if we get new traffic there, a new roundabout, we don't want that little piece being there like County Road 32. So it looks weird that I redid that piece of asphalt. It's just there. Why'd we stop? Well, because it's going to connect to that High Plains Boulevard. So I try to use those pieces to make sense of why we do, when we do it, and where we do it. Let me see here. Let me go back a slide. Now the coordination that goes to kind of how do we coordinate Third and Welker, the County Road 34, the CDOT project, the detours, all that stuff kind of comes into play. And can I tell you the plan's going to go perfectly this year? Probably not. I have the main guy on a speed dial with CDOT. Anything changes, he lets me know. All those things can be worked out. Hopefully it will go well this way. It should. And then safety. Sometimes I'll find pieces of road that are just straight unsafe. When I first moved here, before I worked here, I was driving down County Road 7, and there's a huge puddle that used to be on County Road 7 at Hunter's Ridge. And it was 3 inches deep, and it went out to the center line. And I fixed that. That was my first order of business when I got here. I was like, I got yelled at in the car by my wife because I hit that puddle and almost crashed. And I was like, I'm fixing that right now. Doesn't matter. So sometimes safety takes into how we design and coordinate and plan all the stuff. And then lastly, but not least, is the cost. What can we afford to do? How do we do it? Where do we do it? All that stuff is just, and it's difficult, when you put these plans together and running costs out. And sometimes you always don't have an exact cost on everything, but that's kind of what I go through when I put this plan together. And am I married to this? So if you look on the very bottom and the very top, it says proposed. And what that means is anything can change. I've been through payment management systems in the past where all of your money goes away and they take your savings that you were saving in case that happened. And I've also been times where they've had more money. You just have to adapt. I mean, we're not married to this plan. It can change based on all of those factors. But what we're dealing with right now with the money that we have for the next 5 years, this plan looks pretty good based on what we got going on. So it's kind of where I'm at with all of this. Like I said, we're not married to it. Things can change based on budgets. So here's what 2025 looks like. Typically before I slurry, I'll go through and do crack seal and concrete repairs. If there's any drainage issues, I want to get in there, fix drainage issues, repair those, get the water draining properly and do some patches. So I'll spend about 125,000 in Coyote Run. For asphalt reconstruction, I have County Road 34 from 1st to 25 right out here. Mulligan Street and Mead Street over in the Seekich Business Park, those streets are just terrible. And we will get increased traffic there once we get that High Plains Boulevard in place. And that Mulligan Lake West entrance, that road is so bad. It's just, we're gonna piecemeal that in because it's just, there's so many patches, so many holes out there. But we're gonna do it in a manner that it's permanent. I don't like doing much temporary stuff. So when we replace that little entrance, it'll be a permanent repair. Margot Farms will get slurry sealed this year. That's about 200. Chip seal, there's a couple streets in the Seekis Business Park that are left. They're basically new streets in the last 5 or so years. So that's just those streets that we can just maintain. And then there's a bunch of patching. Those miscellaneous locations are going to be inside of Coyote Run, and then a lot of stuff down on County Road 7 and 28. Any asphalt that's just in terrible, safety issues, we'll do a lot of replacements there. That puts us about 2.6 for our total projects this year. And let me see if anybody has any questions or comments or anything that raises some eyebrows.
Thank you, Manny. Herman.
Hi, Manny. You mentioned numerous times about bad design, bad roads, weren't built right.
Yep.
How are we involved in any new roads being built by developers to make sure that their design is not a bad design?
We review their plans. And that
You're
is,
in it.
Yep. And
Okay.
so when I'm putting this plan together, I will take the plans for Mead Place at 66 and County Road 7. I looked at those plans, and anything that's outside or inside of their areas that they will be improving or changing, I'll look at their plans and they'll integrate that kind of into what we need to do. Same thing with waterfront. We review their plans, and we have an engineer. We have JVA that designs all those plans, but we make sure that they are constructed properly through our normal processes, through construction inspection.
And that includes new roads.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Brad, and then Brooke.
When you say mill and overlay, do you mean a full depth mill and then relay essentially on a reestablished base? Or are you just doing a partial mill and then overlaying more asphalt?
It would be a partial mill and overlay. So what we're doing, what was constructed before, the asphalt was never thick enough for us. But what we're doing now is all these neighborhoods that we are reconstructing. So in 10 or 15 years, when we go back to these neighborhoods again, the asphalt's thick enough where we can mill and overlay it. Basically, we'll do a 2-inch, mill it down, and place 2 inches of new asphalt on it. That's what that mill and overlay looks like. But a full reconstruction is just basically removing all the asphalt. And typically it's 2 inches or 3 inches at best sometimes. And our street standards are 6 inches in residential and 8 inches on the arterial. And some of those streets, like on County Road 7, they're 2 inches. Because I've done patching out there that asphalt's literally 2 inches deep when it should be 8 inches. Yeah.
So I live in Mulligan Lake.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm very aware of the west entrance. That's been terrible and needs definitely rebuilt.
Yeah.
How thick is the asphalt on Mulligan Lake Drive? Have you guys explored that? Is it at the 2 or 3 inches you're talking about? Because there's a contraction joint like every 20 feet.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah, I'm from the desert, so I don't have that contraction, that freeze thaw. And when I came here, I was like, what's wrong with their asphalt? And this is just my own theory. When you have that asphalt that's really thick, it just blocks, it breaks and cracks in these huge blocks, and the cracks are 4 inches wide. Why does the asphalt do that with those huge cracks that separate? It's just the freeze thaw that does it. Now, on the south side, the asphalt's thinner, probably 2 and 3 inches, and it doesn't break in those huge blocks, but it breaks into smaller pieces. It's not as annoying, but still, once the water gets in there, it just destroys it. But that entire area, that entire Mulligan Lakes, it's all got to be replaced. I mean, the PCI is so low in there. It's like below 45 or something. But yeah, most of the streets in town have to be removed and replaced. Then the stuff that I'm slurrying now, those most likely have to be removed and replaced. But that's so far out because it takes so long. When you look at this map, it takes so long to get through some of these streets. We just have to maintain them and piece them together until we can get to them. Yeah.
So with just patching potholes, there are so many, I'm sure that it's like probably playing whack-a-mole, but like with the 34 I-25 interchange, we have so much more heavy truck traffic because every time I-25 shuts down, they come down 7 and sometimes out that way, out 66. But I noticed there was some patching that was done like right on the ramp, which was good because those were getting to be big enough to swallow a small child. But the stuff on 34 that technically would be CDOT's and not ours, do we have a way for them, if we can be like, hey, there's these massive potholes, will they patch it or do we patch it? Or do we just say, hey, we're replacing that road and good luck that you don't lose a tire?
Yeah, so all the little piece of 34 we have that's ours, it's 100% ours. So what is out there is it's kind of like they chip sealed it. I don't know how long ago, beyond the 2017, because I couldn't find record of it. When that chip seal falls off, there's almost no way to replace it. And I was asked, I think it was a year ago, can we go out there and do pothole patching? It's just too thin, so it won't stay. You would have to do patches. And I would probably go out there and do $250,000 of the patches, and the money literally goes in the trash can, which is really tough to swallow. So it's just kind of like waiting, you know, and yet I drive that road at least 10 times a day, and sort of my kids, and I'm like, yes, just dodge and dive and try not to
Pay attention.
blow a tire. I get it.
Yeah.
On the CDOT stuff, yes, there are some really bad patches. Now they're putting heavy trucks on there. And it was probably a week ago, I went down there and they're driving these heavy trucks on there. I was like, this street's not going to last. Is it going to blow up in their face? It's theirs. That's their right of way. If they have to patch it, they did do some patching out there. But yeah, it's that portion is CDOT's right of way. I mean, call them, they'll patch it or not. You know, it's not a lot of control.
Really 34 leading up to the overpass is ours.
You can see kind of where, right where the trucks come out, there's kind of a line there. There's a little post on both sides. I think it's like blue or something. That's where our right of way is at.
Okay.
And that is theirs. And they're driving their trucks on their road that they have to maintain.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I could just interrupt, because part of the rationale for doing 34 this year is it's somewhat of a crime of opportunity, because as you know, that bridge and all that bad pavement that CDOT's, not ours, but ours we're going to take care of. We can do this at the same time because the level of pain is already going to be there. We have the intersection is going to be closing this down. CDOT already in May, those ramps are going to be closed like 2 weeks in May. So that new bridge is coming, new asphalt's coming, and then we're going to come in with ours, right, Manny?
Yeah.
So what you'll see, you won't worry anymore. Where does the water edge lie? What's CDOT's and what's the town's? Because it'll all be just a beautiful new paving job for as long as we can hopefully remember. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, it'll literally, I told my contractor, hey, we're going to sneak in here when they're closed and do that work. You know, there's no sneaking with huge trucks and equipment, but we shouldn't cause another closure. And the nice thing is everything that we're doing starting in 2023 forward, we can easily maintain with a mill and overlay. You know, we should never have to full depth anything ever again. It'll take a while to get there, but that money we're spending is money well spent. We're putting the road structure back to where it should be.
Yeah, David.
Real quick, what is, you said the slurry chip seal lasts 5 to 7 years. What does a slurry crack seal last for?
It's so most of the time we'll do a crack seal before both of it. And some of the stuff, when I just had it labeled as a crack or chip, you want to seal the cracks before you chip it or slurry it. It's kind of this, it's in the same process of, you'll do some patches, you'll crack seal it, you'll either chip seal it or slurry seal it. It just depends on what's most appropriate for that road at the time.
Okay. And how many times can you do like a chip seal on a road before you would have to do a reconstruction? Is there any amount, or is it just depends on how well it wears?
It usually lasts 5 or 7.
But can you, like, after that 5 or 7 years, it gets degraded enough? Can you chip seal it again, or does it need to have that next level of care?
You can, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what we did here is we only had so much money and all we did was just chip it and chip seal it and crack seal it. I think Chris Lorman, I was talking to him one day, he's, man, there's like 1.5 inches of chip seal out on 9.5. I'm like, yeah, that's accurate, because it blows off in about 1.5 inches at a time. So yeah, you can chip and crack seal it and slurry seal it in perpetuity, but it's just not, it's not ideal,
Right.
you know.
Just till we can get to it if it's not one of the ones.
Yeah.
On the.
Like my neighborhood, our neighborhood,
Yeah.
does it need to be replaced at some point? Yes. Can we keep it alive for 10 years with crack seal and slurry seal? We have to, you know, because we just can't get there. There's
Okay.
so many streets.
Nope, I'm sorry.
Trisha. Yep, go ahead.
I'm gonna ask the dreaded question. This proposed 5-year work plan.
Yep.
Doesn't show County Road 7 going that way, our dirt part.
Yep.
I know we have no money for it, like not even a little bit, but with it becoming a heavily driven part, it's not at all on our 5-year plan.
I think that's because isn't it gonna be more of a capital improvement instead of in our streets?
Well, at this point in time, we're designing it in conjunction with our friends in Berthoud. The idea is that we've asked for $5.5 million from our congressional delegate. We actually met with Congressman Evans this week. Mayor and I did earlier this week, reaffirming our ask for that money. We don't have the kind of money that it's going to take to pave those two. So, and I laud Manny for not being aspirational, but we can't put something on here if we don't know for sure that we're going to get it.
I appreciate that.
So, but it is very much in our sights, since many of us drive it every day and, you know, practically lose our cars in some of those. But it's a goal, but it is not, we don't have the funds identified in here to do it.
That makes sense. I do very much appreciate the grading that is happening, obviously, almost daily, it feels like, but it helps so much. So,
Does you can almost tell exactly when you cross from Berthoud into Mead.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
and
It's like,
sometimes,
"Ah,"
sometimes
like
they
that.
grade at the same time, which is really nice. You're like, whoo,
Yeah.
but I mean, the maintenance, I'm sure has to be so hard to keep up with, but it's very much appreciated. So,
Well, and we don't have an option anymore because County Road 7 is closed with no construction, which is weird, but
Any other questions, comments? I just want to say, of course, I've been a proponent for Mead and Mulligan, so thank you very much for getting it. It, will spark economic development up there. It create a good, I guess, look for Mead in the industrial area up there. But thank you very much, because it is a horrible road, but both of them. And so the new one what is this one that's going to be, it's just off of there. I can't remember the name of it. It's not Deer, but it's the slurry chip seal right up there. I remember when it was dirt and we did the actual paving of that long time ago. And to keep it maintained up there is a great start. So thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Mary, can we get this presentation sent to us in our emails? Please. Thank you.
Manny, thank you again, once again. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Good luck with your wife and your insurance company. So,
she wanted to come tonight.
She
I said,
should.
Not a chance.
oh, okay. Thank you, Manny, again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to our 2024-25 community report by our communications director, Lorelei Nelson.
Hi, thank you. We're gonna have the community report online or on Zoom so everybody can look. So you all should have a copy at your desk. We started doing the annual summaries in 2020. We mail these annually to residents and businesses, usually in January, February. They're available online. Right now, we have an ADA remediated copy under the Board of Trustees webpage. And then we have our previous versions archived in Laserfish. So the community report reflects the priorities developed by the Board of Trustees. And those priorities are responsible growth, reliable infrastructure, public safety, fiscal stability, and a connected community. Those 5 priorities are also how we categorize the highlights and the goals. Yep, right there. And so the first page is typically a letter or a note to the community, and it shows the Board of Trustees and some meeting information. And then we move on to demographics. The demographics are updated yearly. Most of the time they don't change, but we do double check and verify that all that information is accurate. The highlights. These are reviewed by department heads and also the town manager based on the previous year's goals. So generally we pick the ones, we take the goals from last year and that were accomplished, and we have the highlights, and we just have a brief explanation of each of the highlights from the previous year. The goals. Keep going. It's okay. There we go. So our goals are established by the Board of Trustees. Usually these are outlined and discussed at retreats. They're restated during the board meeting when we discuss our the budget draft, and then again during the public hearing to approve the budget. And again, they are divided by priorities of responsible growth, reliable infrastructure, public safety, fiscal stability, and connected community. Then we'll move down to our budget overview. And this is just a snapshot of our budget. These are taken from the finalized budget that's approved in December. And then I typically have Helen and Mary review them to make sure that my numbers match what's in the budget. This year we added the capital project budget numbers so everybody can see those are specialized funds and the amounts that we're spending out of there. And scroll down. In 2022, we added the street improvement fund to show the dedicated sales and use tax for road improvements. And this year we did a snapshot of how those funds have been used in the since it was implemented in 2021, 2022, 23, 24, and 25. So you can see that increasing. Our revenues are increasing, so our expenditures are increasing, and then it's broken down. And you can see the carryover revenue, the transfer from the capital or from the general fund into the street improvement fund. So that's done annually as well. You can scroll down. This is also new this year. Many of you may remember this from the retreat. It was actually in the presentation, and we thought it would be a good idea to bring this and put it in the annual report because of how many multi-year projects that we have. Because of these multi-year projects are primarily funded through impact fees, we also divided it out like that. And so you can see what has been spent on these major projects throughout the last few years. And then we add in our awards and grants. These vary year to year, but we generally have an outline of all the department heads, the grants that they have received for their various projects, and a little snapshot of what those grants or awards are used for and who they came from. Additionally, we have the property tax and mill rates on the annual report every year, and we also verify and adjust those. Generally, those stay pretty close to the same. So that is the community report. Like I said, we've been doing that since 2020. We started with a 4-page budget snapshot, and we're now mailing out our 12-page, running back 12 pages, because we keep expanding, we're adding more information. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Questions or comments for Lorelei? Wow, thanks, Lorelei. Thank Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our informational items tonight. We will move on to our proclamation. It is Women's History Month, and I've asked Trustee Babcock to read the proclamation.
Proclamation Women's History Month for March 2025. Whereas American women of all races, classes, and backgrounds have made invaluable contributions to the growth and strength of our nation, both recorded and unrecorded. Whereas American women have played and continue to play vital economic, cultural, and social roles in every aspect of our nation's life, constituting a significant portion of the labor force, both inside and outside the home. Whereas American women have historically provided the majority of the nation's volunteer labor force, demonstrating unwavering dedication to their communities. Whereas American women were instrumental in establishing early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions that continue to shape our society. Whereas American women have been at the forefront of every major progressive social change movement, serving as pioneers in the fight for justice and equality. Whereas American women have bravely served our country in the military, demonstrating courage and commitment in defense of our freedoms. Whereas American women have been leaders not only in securing their own rights, such as suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in movements for abolition, emancipation, industrial labor reform, civil rights, and peace, all of which have contributed to a more just and equitable society for all. And whereas, despite these profound contributions, the role of American women in history has often been overlooked and undervalued in literature, education, and the study of American history. Now, therefore, Colleen Whitlow, Mayor, do hereby designate March 2025 as Women's History Month, celebrating the countless pioneering women and their victories. Given under her hand and seal of the town of Mead, Colorado, on this 24th day of February 2025.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the signing of this proclamation?
I move to approve the signing of this proclamation.
There's a second.
Oh. Go ahead. Second.
Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Shranz.
Yes.
Trustee Adams.
Yes.
Trustee Hagan.
Yes.
Trustee Babcock.
Yes.
Trustee Crane.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to public comment. The board welcomes public comment at this time for any item on the agenda. We will also take comments for items not on the agenda during the second public comment, number 10. Please remember that public comment is not intended to be a question and answer session. The board will listen to your comments and take them into consideration. All comments will be should be directed to the Board of Trustees and not to be specific individuals. If you wish to speak during this public comment period, please adhere to the town's general guidelines. Please start by stating your full name and address for the record. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the Board of Trustees. If you are representing a group, you will have 5 minutes. We ask that all speakers and audience members treat one another with respect and dignity. Let's ensure we maintain a welcoming environment and avoid any actions that could be distracting. Is there anyone here in the room that would like to speak to the Board of Trustees tonight? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda. It is amended tonight with a removing of 9E and 9E. Is there a motion? I'm E and I, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to approve the amended consent agenda?
I move to approve the amended consent agenda, removing item E and I.
Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Babcock.
Yes.
Trustee Crane.
Yes.
Trustee Adams.
Yes.
Trustee Shranz.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris.
Yes.
Trustee Hagan.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you very much. Motion carries. We will move on to 9E, which is the resolution for number 19. It's a resolution for the town of Mead, Colorado, adopting an annual adjustment to the town sewer plant investment fees and sewer user fees for 2025. I will turn the podium over to Trustee Babcock for questions or comments.
I had all of my questions answered in the information session, so if anybody else has any discussion, otherwise.
When you
I
make a
move to
motion. Okay. Yeah.
I move to approve resolution number 14-R-2025, a resolution of the town of Mead, Colorado, adopting annual adjustments to the town's sewer plant investment fees and sewer user fees for 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Adams,
Yes.
trustee Shranz,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris,
Yes.
trustee Babcock,
Yes.
trustee Hagan,
Yes.
trustee Crane,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes, thank you very much. Motion carries for 9E, resolution number 14-R-2025. We will now move on to 9I, resolution number 18-R-2025. This is a resolution of the town of Mead approving a task order for Wilson and Company Incorporated Engineers and Architects to provide a thank you, and design service for the 4th Street Alley Improvement Project. I will turn over the podium to trustee Hagan for questions or comments. Sir?
Do you want to say something first?
I have a little presentation just to explain the item, if you'd like me to do that.
Go ahead.
Okay.
What's the question?
Excuse me, earlier in the evening about what Erica was going to do.
Okay, thank you. All right, little background. So we're talking about the 4th Street alley paving design, and this is the alley that's bordered on the north by Martin Avenue, on the south by Fairbairn Avenue, runs north-south, west of 4th Street. It's a gravel surface, as you see there in that photo, and we have abutting it a variety of users, right? We have residential homes and lots abutting it, and then we also have commercial properties abutting it. This would be Anytime Fitness, the Scooter Hinge building, and our new florist, Sweet Flower Florist. Some of the items that we've identified, which prompted us to go down this path. We do have a large commercial building there that have gutters that drain to the alley. There's really no facilities in the alley, storm drain facilities in the alley to receive that, right? We don't have an underground system that exists there today. We've had a number of drainage complaints from the residents there spanning the last 3 years or so. Obviously, we have continuing gravel maintenance efforts from a public works operations standpoint to maintain that grading and address the drainage there. We've had some issues with some of the residents who have taken it upon themselves to grade and plow the alley on occasion, so that surface gets disturbed. Lots of utility disturbance in there, particularly lately with the development, United Power, Comcast. So the drainage does get disturbed in the alley, particularly when you have a gravel surface. So certainly paving it would help eliminate a lot of these issues. The other thing is we'd like to provide a comprehensive plan, right, that addresses it from end to end. It's not just addressing one particular problem at the north end, right? We want to look at the alley as a whole and have a comprehensive solution. So we do have on-call engineering firms under contract. In 2022, we released an RFQ for engineering services. We received 8 proposals at that time. We did select 5 different firms who are under contract now. We did base that selection on qualifications and not by price. And the reason for that is the federal requirement, and we need these firms to provide that service for both local and federal projects. So we followed a more stringent requirement there. We utilized all 5 firms for various projects since 2022. You see some of them there, the underpass design, the park projects, bridge design, County Road 7 paving that we talked about earlier up north. All of those are in various stages that utilizing those firms. Some we've had great luck with and some not so great luck, honestly. So the item before you tonight is the task order with Wilson and Company. Wilson has really emerged as one of the preferred vendors. They provide high quality service to us. deliver high quality plan sets, provide a timely response, and they have a real understanding of what type of support we need as a small work group. If I have to spend, dozens and in some cases hundreds of hours, which Manny's had to do quite a bit of, managing some consultants that aren't used to our standards. They don't put bid packages together on a regular basis. They're not incorporating our comments into their plan sets. That's not of a good value to us. So we've been really pleased with Wilson so far. Their proposal for this particular task is $94,910. It does include the topo survey, the subsurface utility engineering, which we'll talk about more here in a second, project management, construction drawings, and support during construction. The SUE, the subsurface utility engineering, has a big price tag. It's almost 45% of this particular proposal, which is hard to swallow. That is a not to exceed amount. We certainly hope we don't need to use all of that. But it is a best guess at this point. This is required by state statute that we do a significant level of investigation of underground utilities, primarily to protect those utilities from damage during construction and make sure that construction moves smoothly so that contractors know where all the various utilities are located. Let's see. I certainly want to avoid coming back to you with a change order later as well. So we have a hefty number in there so that in 6 weeks, I don't have to come back to you again and ask for more because we found there were more utilities than anticipated or more potholes that we needed to do to identify where those utilities were located, more surveying, that kind of thing. And then the approved budget for 2025 did include $400,000 for this particular item for construction and for design efforts. And then finally, this is my last slide. I just wanted to talk about our schedule. We're looking at April 15 for completion of the survey and the locates. May 15, we would have preliminary plans ready for review by staff and utility coordination. And we'd have final design plans at the end of June. Our intent would be to roll this into our existing street maintenance contracts and utilize the paving contractor and the concrete contractor we already have, and could roll that right into construction this summer or early fall, kind of depending on where our street maintenance contractor lands. So that's all I have for you. Happy to answer any questions.
So I don't really have any questions for you. I was pulling it from the agenda to discuss it amongst the board. I've owned a civil engineering company for 22 years and done this type of work. And this is quite honestly like the easiest work you can do as an engineer. It's just asphalting, make sure it grades. It's pretty basic. We do this work all the time. My business partner just did 2 blocks in Superior for under $10,000. That included the survey, that included the asphalt design, that included all the grading and the SUE. The one thing that is different that they included is they called in the locates for the utilities and we mapped them on the plan. And we had the contractor do the potholing, which added about $6,000 to that bid if you put it under the contractor to locate or to pothole the utilities. It meets the level of due diligence required by any standard. And he did that work for 2 blocks for under $10,000. It's the same scope of work. It's very similar. I mean, you got hard points on both ends of your alley. Your grades don't change that much. It's a pretty straightforward design. And it's abusive. I mean, it's too much. It's too much by a factor of like 4. So it's for this level of design. I mean, for the technical level of the design. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not like I'm trying to get the work, but I don't want to waste $80,000 of taxpayer money by for a single block of work in an alley. The good news is they just bid those Superior projects and they're about 140,000 built by the contractor. So we'll still be way under budget, but that would mean that our design fee is 95,000 for a $140,000 construction project. That's way out of whack, way out of whack. So I guess I'm saying is I wanted to get that out there and just say I'm not going to support this.
Thank you, Brad. Helen, do you have any, or Erica, response back to Brad before we add this? Because they're professionals along with you. I didn't know you were a civil engineer. I thought you were water, so sorry.
And I'm a consultant, so I write these cost proposals all the time. And we literally just did a project like this.
Okay.
So it's not like outdated. I don't know what it's going for now. Do it.
Could I ask one question, Trustee Hagan? The contract that you did for Superior, was it for the town of Superior?
Yes.
And so you bid on they put out an RFP for somebody to do the alley work?
We're on their list of, just like Wilson and Associates, we're on their list of consultants. And so they asked for a few proposals on that work. And the other firm that was on there was like a few $1,000s more than us. It's not like we were way off balance from the other people. I just think that smaller firms are more apt to give you better pricing. And for that type of work, I understand that big firms have their place. Like I wouldn't bid a 10-mile stretch I-25, improvements, but this is right up our alley, and this is what we do. So it's way out of whack.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. I mean, we typically, when we put out for RFPs on things, we aren't as successful. We certainly don't often get small firms like yours. I don't know how many people you have in your firm.
Well, just a couple things. I do have Tim Kemp here from Wilson who can speak to the specifics of the proposal. But before I turn it over to him, if we were to do something different, I think we might miss the window, right, to utilize our existing contractors if we need to procure a different company. The companies we have on contract are for this reason, right? So we can utilize them immediately.
Yeah, I get it. I'm not against paving the alley. I am partly owner of Scooter Hinge, and it'll help my property value. So I'm not against the project. I'm just against spending too much money on the design.
Okay.
Maybe we can wait before we ask questions, get all the information that we can get.
Do you have
Tim, could
anything
you come
wanna
up
add to
and
that, Tim?
address any of the questions maybe that Brad has already asked? And then we'll open. Stated.
Is it on already?
Yes.
Okay. First time here to the Mead trustees meeting. So thank you, Mayor and members of the board. Tim Kemp, Wilson and Company, senior engineer. Erica and I talked Friday, when she brought some concerns. So if there's anything you want to address in specific, please let me know.
I kind of laid out what I gave what I think is a reasonable cost for the design of one block of alley. That's, the grades aren't going to change significantly from what the grades are now. It's not a detailed drainage plan that you got to submit with it. There's not a lot of high level work to be done here. So I don't have any questions. I just thought that your costs were too high.
Okay. No, and appreciate the feedback. I think some of the things that Erica and I talked about a little bit on Friday, and then again this morning we talked. It definitely written as a not to exceed contract. So we wanted to make sure, just kind of reiterating what Erica had mentioned, that we have everything covered in there, with the intent that if we don't need a service, if we find that the utilities, especially the underground, there is some overhead utility already. I think that most of you are aware of, that will remain in place, but just not knowing at this point how many underground utilities there are, we wanted to be conservative with that number. Certainly can reevaluate once we get the topographic survey and have the locates done by the locating company, which will give us a good idea of the number of utilities in the alley. We have a few ideas as to what exists, but really need to take the next step forward before we can really know what we're dealing with utilities. And I think that's probably the biggest piece of it.
I appreciate that, but
Yeah.
I just don't see how you're gonna ever get from 95,000 to 10. I mean, is that fair? You don't think you'll be able to get down to 10,000?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, just being honest.
Brooke.
So I have no background on any of this, but when it was polled, it was good because I have questions. Erica, probably. So the 400,000 is budgeted for the entire construction of just that alley.
That's correct.
Everything's so expensive. Everything. I mean, I get it, but I guess
So I thought,
after listening to him saying he does this as well, he like there's certain things that we talk about that I know a little more about. I don't of this, but $95,000 for the engineering of what did it 340 linear feet, lane feet. I don't know how they see. I don't even know what your letters mean. It seems like a lot. And so my thing was, and I'm glad you addressed it, was why didn't we go out to RFP? But because we have the 5, so that makes sense. But so we just pick someone and ask for okay. So
I would imagine the $400,000, and I'm looking at the capital improvement project number, it's page 9, that this 400,000 that you're talking about includes the parking lot.
No.
No. Okay. Okay, so this is wrong in here. In the report.
Those are two different things. What I believe Erica's funding is in the pavement management program, correct?
Okay. I apologize. Sorry.
The parking lot downtown is a separate project. That's part of our community center. And we have it called out as a line item.
Which is about 400,000
Yeah.
for the parking lot. Mhm.
I apologize. I was looking at this and looking at the alley costs. So, okay. Anything? David and then
One
Harmon.
other question. Erica, didn't we talk about a long time ago that anytime we were doing some sort of major project like this, that we were talking about undergrounding utilities, not just leaving them above?
We have talked about it several times. We've used up all of our undergrounding fund from, that's collected through United Power. We used it all up on the intersection project, so there aren't funds available for that. And so, I mean, this is something that we would task our engineering firm to look at is, can we construct the alley right without undergrounding everything? Or is that, is the relocation necessary because of the work? Does that answer your question?
Yes, do you know when we will be getting more funds, or how will we be getting more funds from?
Yeah,
United
it's
Power?
paid by the rate payers, and so it's collected monthly on your electric bill. So I don't know how long it would take to build that fund back up again.
Okay. Just we have so many power outages during high winds or major storms. It's
Right.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
We need to get these things put underground.
Yeah, if we have to, if it's in the way, for example, if the pole is in the way, the utility has to relocate that pole at their expense. But if we want to underground it, the town would have to pay for that delta between relocating the pole and undergrounding it.
I have some general procedural questions. So I think what I'm hearing is that we have sent out RFPs to different engineering firms. And this is one of the responses to the RFPs, right?
Yeah, the request for proposals was global, right? When we selected 5 firms, we didn't do one specific to this
Yeah,
task.
no, yeah, you send it out to whomever.
Right.
And everybody responds it within a certain
Yep.
time frame. Is it from the project standpoint, is it too late in the process to submit another RFP?
Well, we certainly could do that, but I think it would push this construction to another seat.
Well, okay, I get that, but to address trustee Hagan's concern, you know, one of the other advantages of a small company is they can turn an RFP over pretty quick. So there's an advantage to there, and maybe it might make sense to, at this point, to send out the RFP again to Mr. Hagan and his. Fine, to whoever you're talking about, okay? And see if in fact it comes in at $10,000. Personally, I'd be a little surprised, but I'm not a civil engineer either. If it does come in at 10,000 and it meets the scope of work that is called out in the RFP, then I would have some questions, but that's, I think, the only way that we're going to settle this discussion. Because, you know, trustee Hagan put the carrot out there that says I can do 90,000 for 10. That's a hell of a carrot to just throw over the fence and say, I don't want to do that. Whether or not that is in fact true, I don't know. I don't know if you can really do it for 10. Because I don't know if they have seen, if you have seen the scope of work. I mean, this is what we've been told. Yeah, the whole scope?
Yes.
Okay, so there it is. Maybe it does make sense to, if we could turn it over.
I showed it to my business partner who just did the 2 blocks in Superior, and he had a fit. He was like, he couldn't believe it, but
And that's
so,
fine.
yeah.
I'm not saying he's wrong or anything. I'm just saying it's worth looking into because there is such a disparagement in the costs. I mean, 10 to 90 is big. If it was 85 to 95, I'd say it's not worth it. So I would suggest maybe we fire off the RFP to the other company, whatever they are, and see if in fact.
This is a procedural question. And when we put out an RFP, it's not like we get to choose who responds to it. It could be 5 huge companies. Like I know Total Concrete Solutions. If you go to them as a homeowner and you say, I want to pave this little, pad for a shed on the side of my house, they're going to bid you 10 grand for that thing because they don't want the job, right? They don't want it. That's too small. They could care less. So they're going to give you a ridiculous bid. And I've been told this by someone who works there. They're going to give you a ridiculous bid because they don't really want you to take it. But if you're willing to pay them 10 grand, sure as hell, they'll come over there and do that concrete pad for you. So you don't get to choose who gives you the bids, right? Like if a small company wanted something like this, then, well, I'm just saying we don't get, if we can put it out there, and I'm not saying, but there is a chance we get no small companies that want this, just saying.
That's highly unlikely, but it's more to so when we put out the RFQ and all these firms submitted, just like the Trails and Master Plan last week, 2 weeks ago, staff chose the consultant they wanted, and that's the one that we acted on. That's probably what happened when they narrowed it down to the top 5 that they wanted to include on the list. There could have been smaller firms that submitted but weren't recommended. So I haven't seen the list of people that provided qualifications and were put on the 5 chosen and who didn't. But if you opened it up right now, you'd probably get 15 to 20 firms, including small firms that wanted to propose on town projects.
And yours not being one
Because I'm here. Yeah.
I can't ignore that.
Well-
I don't know how any of us can.
Well, I have a procedural question. If we do that, are we obligated to the RFP that we did in 2022 for the 5 firms?
No. But right, it sends a message to the 5 firms we have on contract
That's
that we don't
correct.
want to use them.
That's correct.
Or to lower the prices.
Right. Make sure they're not overcharging us.
Excuse me, let's have the board have a discussion. But the packet material that Tim has provided to the town of Mead is highlighted on extremely amount of detailed area. I mean, if you look at exactly what has been done through the federal proposal and the state statute, it's all lined up. So I think we need to discuss this in a different way. I don't want to send a message stating from the town of Mead to our firms and our staff that this qualified firm cannot do the work. So
I have a problem sending the message to the firms that we don't feel their one bid is in line with what maybe I don't know, but hearing someone who does speak on it, how can you not question that? Like, I think it sends the message of we are questioning if we're getting the best price and quality work. So I completely, coming from a different, not engineering, understand when you find somebody that knows how you work and helps you save time and money and energy, that is worth a whole lot. But when something like this is brought up by someone who works in the industry and we're talking $80,000, how can you not question that? I can't sit up here and I guess I will only speak for myself. I can't not question that. So I'd like to see other bids on this. I hate that it blows our timeline out of the water and that we might not be able to use the same contractors to do all the road work, because yes, that probably is a savings, but is it worth, if it's $80,000 on the engineering, where else are we overspending? Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing up here? Making sure, not just going, yes, that road needs paved, but that it gets paved without robbing our taxpayers, without overpaying $80,000 on this one thing. What else are we not looking at? Not that you probably don't provide quality work, sir, and thank you for coming up here kind of in the line of fire, but it does make you wonder, like, could we get the same quality work done for less, or are we fine to say, nope, here's the number they gave us, let's go for it?
I guess, go back to my original question. Can we send the RFP out again to a small company and see if the response is in fact what we are hearing it could be?
Trustee Strand, maybe let me jump in and try to help to answer that question. If the town were to issue an RFP, you can't just send it to small firms,
No.
right? You send it to the entire universe.
Right.
I think it's important also to clarify that your purchasing policy for the town specifically states that any sort of professional service is not required to be bid, right? Because you're basing the ultimate selection on qualifications. So what the town did back in, I believe it was 2022 or 2023, is we issued an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications, so that we could have a stable of multiple engineering firms that are under contract with the town to do specifically this, which is to propose engineering services on discrete town projects. So the decision is being made on qualifications, not necessarily on price, because that's not required by the town's purchasing policy.
But I think some of the issue, though, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I didn't hear you say anywhere in there that we incorporated any smaller companies as part of that to see if they qualified. Because all I'm hearing is what we have is 5 qualified engineering firms, and they're all large engineering firms. We have not gone to any of the smaller engineering firms and say, when do you qualify? Could you qualify? Do you want to qualify?
I
So we would
think
have in our state-
all of the smaller firms were given the same opportunity to respond to the RFQ in 2022.
Okay, so now you're giving me an answer. If they weren't what?
They weren't shortlisted.
There were 30 30 firms that responded, right? And the team narrowed it down to 5.
I understand. I understand how the process works.
Okay.
There was 8.
Or 8,
for-
sorry.
There were 8. There were not 30.
Yes,
Would it,
I was a professional consultant for 20 years too, so I understand RFPs, RFQs, I understand all of that stuff. All I am asking is, did we cover the base that included high, medium, and small companies in this, or did we just select
Well,
big companies? That's all.
we select qualified companies.
Well, that doesn't mean a small company can't be qualified.
It could have been, but it just so happened that of the 8 that put in, we selected 5 based on their qualifications. Now, remember, we were looking at following federal processes because, for example, County Road 7, we know that we're asking for federal money. So if you don't design it based on a federally qualified, which is not based on price, and I'm going to tell you, I have a history with this at the city of Fort Collins, where we inadvertently slipped price into the RFQ, and it cost us $1 million that we had to pay of local money. So we are very, very careful to make sure we're based on their qualifications and not what their hourly rate is. We can't look at that.
I totally appreciate that. I really
Okay.
do. I have no problem. But it still begs the question that you're going to have some firms that you have to hold this federal standard to. But you can also have smaller firms that can do a 300-yard alley. And I think that's what Trustee Hagan is trying to bring out. There aren't a whole lot of other requirements here. It's a pretty simple SOW. And I don't always have to go to the large companies that we've qualified because they can do all these other wonderful things to do that. That's the only point I'm trying to make here. I think our stable should include large companies that meet all of those qualifications, but it should also include smaller companies for the smaller, less complicated tasks, which I understand a large company is going to have to charge. They carry a lot more overhead than a smaller company does. And we're paying for that overhead, to Trustee Brooks' point. So I understand that. I'm just saying our stable isn't spread enough. It's heavy on the top end. We don't have anything on the bottom end to look at some of these smaller projects that we have. So that's my comment. I think I covered what you're trying to get to as well.
Yeah, like I wouldn't propose to do the wastewater treatment plant expansion because it's not my specialty. But I'll design a pump station or I'll do an alley. I'm qualified. And just because I give a good price doesn't mean that I'm not going to do the level of work that any other engineer would do on the project.
Yeah.
And we do produce CDOT federal plan sets that comply with all their requirements. It's not that big of a specialty. You don't need a big firm for that.
could our first step be asking for a RFP from R5? Or do we not pit them against each other? Because I mean, I don't know what protocol is of having 5. You just pick one, and because they're one of our 5, like you said, we don't go off cost. But when it's brought up that you have another town that did the work, I mean, it's not like he's just saying, oh, I could do this. We have some evidence here, like.
Well, we have evidence from using a couple of the other 5 firms that it has caused us, they didn't give us what we needed.
Well, maybe they.
And
need
it
to
caused
not be
us
our
to
5
have
firms.
our public works staff, our engineering staff, have to essentially do the work. So one of the reasons why we base it on qualifications, part of the qualifications is our history with firms. So we have used Wilson. They are doing our 1601. They're doing the design of County Road 7. They meet their deadlines. They work well with our partners. Now, I would agree with you if we lower our standards to town projects that don't include some of the reasons why we use some of the firms we use, it could be, but it doesn't always work that way because it's like anything else. We didn't put out an RFP that was, for small town projects. We have not done that. Our thing was based on a whole variety of things that we were looking for different experience levels. But I mean, we're happy to forego this project for this year, and we can put it in the work plan for maybe this fall to go out with a targeted RFQ for town projects that don't have to have federal funding. Does that make sense, Erica? And we'll see how we do.
What the board wants, then it'll be
Yeah.
taken off the table for this year and the alley won't get done and more erosion and other stuff. So, oh, well, I know, but
That's not the-
We have a property owner who's bringing up this. Like, I mean, if anybody, he would benefit from it being paved. And I think if he's saying that, wow, this looks crazy to do this work that would benefit my property, I don't think we're harming any other residents in this by waiting.
but if you go out to RFP, you're not going to hit this year. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Brooke. Take it off the table
You don't-
and
Well, you
do,
said to fall.
You don't know that.
She's saying,
We
she's saying.
but no, the
I could
RFP
get a
process.
proposal from another firm, small firm, in a week.
That's
you
not
wanted-
how this process goes in.
I understand, but it doesn't have to be complicated either. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be a quick post to BidNet, and people submit proposals and you go through it. We do it every day.
Are we still at a point though that we can send out an RFP to a small company and see if in fact it's going to be 10,000? I'm just struggling with that in my mind, with that disparity from 10,000.
We do not send out RFPs to specific companies. We put them on BidNet. We don't target companies with our RFPs. We cast a wide net. And
So we don't-
anyone is willing, any willing engineering firm can put in on this. We don't exclude anybody from that process. So, but what I'm hearing, if the board wants to press pause on this, we can, as time permits, Erica and her team could put together an RFQ for this and go back out specifically for small town projects. That would probably target smaller firms. I don't know.
So you tell me for this particular project, we don't have that. To look at for this particular project.
We,
Without stopping everything, pushing it into next year, writing RFQs and all this other stuff. We don't have a way to allow a small company to bid on this job right now.
no,
We
I
don't have a
mean,
way
we
to
don't
end
have a current, we have a whole set of procedures at the town that we follow through our purchasing policy. We don't just put something out for a week, we flesh out the project. We would, in this case, we would leave it more generic, but as you saw from the timeline of when Erica wanted to get this thing started, was we'd be hitting the ground running by April 15th. So all it does is it pushes it to next year. If we can procure an engineer and go through all that, we just were kind of riding the wave of this. We were going to glom onto our contracts for our paving contracts for the summer.
But I might suggest that forward with this particular project as a state, that's already in the middle. But somewhere down the road, we need to put that RFQ out for smaller companies, organizations to begin that process. I don't want to stop this thing until next year. I think the residents have spoken and I think they deserve.
Actually, I'd like to speak on that at some point.
No, sir, no.
Not at this time. Hold
But
on.
Anyway, it's, I don't. But I do, to trustee Hagan's point, I think we should have an RFQ for small companies, for smaller capital projects that don't get into this. big-
And just to clarify, it's not an RFQ for small companies. It would be an RFQ for smaller town projects. However, that's ultimately defined by staff. Maybe it's projects that don't involve federal funding or state funding,
Yeah.
right? Or projects that are underneath a certain dollar threshold,
We still do the
with the
work.
goal of procuring maybe 3, 4, 5 companies that would be under contract with the town to provide services on an on-call basis. And the decision on which firm or firms to be under contract with would be based on qualifications, because it's a professional services type agreement.
No problem with that.
Okay.
I agree, I
Please
just think
tell them.
we don't have that piece today. I think we need that.
Approve.
piece of it.
Federal.
I think we're gonna have a lot
He's-
more
they're missing the point.
smaller capital projects.
Small firms can do federal work, so that's not a delineation that needs to be made in the RFQ. It's just for general services. I mean, we do every aspect of municipal design except for wastewater and water treatment, and that's a specialized area that most firms don't do, actually, even a lot of big ones. So there doesn't have to be a delineation on the scope of work that we're putting RFP or RFQ out for. It can just be qualified firms to do town municipal work, and you could have various sizes of projects, I guess, but I don't even think that's necessary. We're doing a Johnstown pipeline project right now, and our fees were over 600,000. So, but it's a pump station and 10-mile pipeline. It's a little more complicated than an intersection or an alley. So any engineering firm is qualified to do the alley work.
Sorry, I did not.
I'd hate to stop this project, guys. I really do. I mean, it's already in the pipeline. We've already discussed at the retreat, the budget, it's budgeted. I know we have concerns. Brad has some concerns. I really hate to stop moving forward with this. It needs to get done. The residents want it. We've got new business coming, economic development. Just, it will spur that whole and help the Main Street move forward. So, and I know that this building hopefully will get done soon. And I think that the flower shop and Anytime Fitness would be super happy. And the residents on the western side would be happy too about it. So, I mean, I'd hate to stop this project, guys.
I have two things, if I may. One, I want to move that resolution 18R 2025 as written, the resolution of Town of Mead, Colorado, approving a task order for Wilson and Company engineers and architects provide topographical design service for 4th Street Alley Improvement Project be approved.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Shranz.
Yes.
Trustee Hagan.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris.
I would love to see project to go forward too, but I do have to question that. I'm gonna say no.
Trustee Adams.
No.
Trustee Crane.
No.
Trustee Babcock.
No.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. The motion fails. We need to give direction to staff, and I think we'll put pause on this project for now. So thank you very much. Sir, thank you very much, Tim,
I have
very
a
much
second.
for being here.
And the second thing, because I want to, this is a question for Marcus. Is this a motion to instruct staff to put an RFQ out for other? I don't know how you want to do it. How do I know it gets done? What's the procedural
It
way?
could be a sure, if
direct
you wanna
staff to
it
do
as
that.
a motion to instruct staff to do an RFQ for smaller town projects. Or just as long as there's consensus of the board with that direction. I mean, I think there should be some discussion so that staff knows what your direction is.
Well, let me make the motion, and then we're gonna have the discussion as part of the motion. So I move that we direct staff to develop an RFQ or submit an RFQ to smaller firms. Is that the right thing? No?
Nope. Nope, not
Okay,
smaller
just
firms.
fine, just submit RFQs.
For town project.
For town projects, it doesn't have to be smaller town projects.
Okay.
Just town projects.
I
in
move
general.
that we direct staff to submit an RFQ for town projects.
Second.
You have a motion and a second.
I understand,
Okay.
but we have an on-call services. So, Marcus, I need some guidance legally if we can do this.
Well, I'd want to hear from staff, but I mean, we have our on-call firms that are. The RFQ, my recollection of the RFQ was for town projects that involve federal funding.
And local funding.
federal?
Was for both.
Yep, it was for both.
Okay. So we've already issued that RFQ in 2022. The RFQ was structured, I believe, for a 5-year term. I believe it was a 1-year term with 4 1-year renewals.
I think that's how the contracts are written.
Okay. So the firms that you currently have under contract are under contract through 2027.
So what I am hearing,
It's not like we're obligated to pay them a certain amount, a minimum amount per year. There's something in the contract that says we can't advertise for qualifications.
I would have to go back and look at that. I would highly doubt that sort of language would be in there.
so you're telling me that it's all there. We've done it. There's nothing left to do until this particular 5-year period is up.
Not necessarily. If the direction from the board is to issue or to instruct staff to issue another RFQ, then that could be done.
It would just add more firms to our thing on call services, but we keep the existing 5. I'm just trying to understand.
We would,
Build the stable, as Marcus said. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I would be curious, what the estimate of staff time is to do a new RFQ. Or if that's something that staff would support.
Well, it's certainly, we're building 11 capital projects this year. It certainly would take away time to do it now. It would, I would tell you it's workload wise, we couldn't do it right now, but that isn't to say we couldn't do it sometime later in time for a 2026 project. But to draft an RFP and put it out for bid, we usually leave things out for 4 or 6 weeks. Several more weeks to select somebody, get them under contract, come back to you with a contract. This is probably several months out. If we were to start today, it's several months away to get somebody on contract. It also, just as a side note, it's confusing to the people we do have on contract, because then they don't know, are they supposed to propose on the new RFP because they don't want to be excluded, right, from some future work if they don't. So we need to understand, do we want to keep them on, or do we want to just start from scratch and reevaluate for all projects?
I think they'd be welcome to submit as well, again, into the new RFQ process. But I would suggest to staff, based on what I'm hearing and how I feel, is we should get some small local firms to be included in the mix. And we'll get way better bang for the dollar for all our capital design projects.
So if we don't exclude price, or if we don't specify, right, whether it's federal or non-federal, it makes a difference whether we have price as a selection criteria. So if we use price, we can't use those people for federal projects.
I don't think, usually you just submit a rate schedule for the billing rates for each level of engineer or consulting within each company. It's usually not a bid until you actually get a RFP or a scope of work that you're bidding for, right? So it doesn't need to be part of the qualification. It can be, I've seen it in proposals or RFQs where they're saying cost is only 10% of the consideration. So you can consider it but it's only in the rates. It's not typically, because you don't have a scope of work to bid on. So I don't know why this is so. I mean, if the town of Superior hires small firms to do a large range of their work, why is it so hard for Mead, which is significantly smaller and has far fewer capital projects, to also include smaller firms and get better prices? I mean, I saw how much we paid for design of this intersection out here. Don't get me started. I mean, it's the scale of the additional cost that we've incurred from having big firms only is pretty big if you look at it more globally. It's not just one project that happens to be way out of scale. It's more than that.
So what you proposed and you seconded a new call for RFP for on-call services for town projects. And then what's the rest of it? Because if it's either superseding what we've already got in an amendment 3 or whatever it's called now, I don't want us to get us in a bind. I don't. Because if we've already got an amendment for on-call services and then we issue another RFP, how does that work without, it's a little confusing. Either
Well, I mean,
we-
I mean, I think we'd have to try to come up with how we're distinguishing, right? I mean, perhaps these would be for projects that involve no federal or state funding, local funding only, or something.
But he's saying that a small firm can do federal and state funded projects, so that shouldn't
Right.
be the delineation.
No, I understand that, but we already went through the process in 2022 where we had a global call for any firm in the world. I don't care if it's a big firm or a medium-sized firm or a small firm, to respond to that RFQ and show to the town that they're qualified to do the work. And we have 5 firms that are currently under contract. So in that RFQ, we said that the initial contract term would be 1 year with 4 one-year renewals. So it runs through 2027 is my recollection of how that RFQ was structured. So if the desire of the board is to issue a new RFQ, I think we need to have some additional guidance in terms of how we're gonna bifurcate or delineate that.
I guess, well, yeah, but my question is, if in fact in 2022, they went out to everybody in the world, why did not small companies respond to the RFQs?
How do we not know?
Well, we got 8 and 3 of them didn't qualify, right? That's why.
Yeah,
we're
8
doing another
responses.
They didn't choose them.
Yeah, 8 responses.
Correct.
But what I'm understanding is it was a pretty much of a global distribution to any company who wanted to. So what I'm hearing is apparently smaller companies either didn't respond or they didn't meet the qualifications. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look and see. I don't know what the size of all of the 8 firms were.
Well, not the 8, everybody who responded. You selected 8 out of,
No,
you selected
only
5 out of 8.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry. Yeah, so apparently smaller companies were not rushing to submit their RFQ, their response to the RFQ. They elected not to even respond if you only got 8 responses. So it's not that we didn't give small businesses or small companies the opportunity. Small companies chose not to take that. And if that's all true, then I will pull back my motion and rescind it, because now I'm more comfortable that small companies were not isolated from the process.
they were not.
Okay,
They were not
then
excluded.
I pull back my motion.
I would make the motion that we open up the bid process and the RFQ process to all engineering firms for all scopes of service that the town would need. Federal, no matter of size, the qualifications of the firms will be presented to the board, and we should focus on selecting qualified firms of different sizes.
Qualified to look over a bunch of
No, that would be them.
proposals and
No, that'd be
make
them.
that call. That's up to them. You're saying present it to the board to choose a qualified firm?
No,
Okay.
That they.
but present who submitted what. I want to see an outline of who submitted what. I don't want to just disqualify the firm because they want to get the same 5 back.
Do that? I would trust staff to not do
Yeah,
that.
we have to
That's-
trust them at some point. I don't feel like.
That's,
I mean, we just did this 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So what happened between now and then?
Our
Nothing.
rates are going up, but 3 years later, it seems like maybe I don't know if we're getting our money's worth. And I mean, it's hard because most of us don't have that expertise, but when it's put out there, it's hard to ignore. Could we?
Well, I believe that resolution 18 will be pushed to the next year or whenever we decide to bring this back at the next meeting or a meeting in the future. So Tim, thank you very much for being here today. I
Thank
think
you
the
for allowing
discussion
me
is
to
over for right
take
now.
part in this.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, thank you. We'll move on to our second public comment of the evening. We have no further general business. We are asking to follow the same guidelines as before. I will call on individuals in order which they have signed in. Again, I ask all speakers and audience members to treat one another with respect and dignity. Is there anyone that would like to come and talk to the Board of Trustees at this time?
So as a resident of that alley, Don Smith, 325 Main Street. As a resident of that alley, first of all, we're talking about $400,000 to pay one alley. I was told last year, either by Mary or by Colleen, the plan is to pave all the alleys in downtown at some point. So we need to look at the cost of just my one alley, okay? Secondly, that alley has been relatively fine until recently when they dumped some more dirt in there, and now we got a drainage problem because it's all mud and it was gravel before. So if they would quit grading it and just leave it the way it was for a little while, it drains just fine. To spend $400,000 on the alley behind me and Brad here is absolutely absurd. If anybody sitting up there doesn't think so, I'm not sure why. But there's no real reason for it. The drainage works. I live there. It worked fine until recently. They put some more dirt in there and now it's muddy. At both ends, the concrete comes up and it traps the water. Maybe we ought to just slope it one direction. But $400,000, guys? Come on now. This is just over the top. And everything Brad said there is absolutely right. When it comes to bids, we shouldn't just be taking the big companies. And if anybody thinks that because the big company doesn't work for the big jobs on us, it's not going to take we're not going to give them the little jobs. We give them the little jobs too. We should be bidding this out to everybody. Well, we really didn't. And this is just absurd to spend $90,000 to design some asphalt in my alley and then another $300,000 to do whatever you're going to do with that asphalt. Come on. Why are we even arguing about this? Why is it even a discussion? $400,000. I went up and down that street and I've got 12 signatures here of people and I told them what I was going to do and all of them thought I was crazy. They thought I was making it up. $400,000 I told them, we're going to do my alley, just the alley behind my place for $400,000. Nobody wanted it. And if you guys continue down this road, I'm going to go up and down every street and get everybody up on this wagon. It's ridiculous. We don't need that alley done. So, yeah, I live there and all the residents aren't for that alley.
Thank you. All right. Okay, is there anyone else in the room that'd like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our legislative update, our attorney report by Marcus McCaskill. Sir?
The Board of Trustees have just a couple of quick legislative updates for you, and a lot of these are on bills that I have discussed at prior meetings as well. House Bill 251060. This is the electronic detection system legislation. It would limit a local government's ability to deny permits for alarm systems that deliver electric shock by defining electric fences as alarm systems and requiring local jurisdictions to permit those. The last week, apparently the sponsors added language that narrowed the bill to commercial and industrial zones. However, CML continues to have concerns about the bill that have not been addressed. This legislation is scheduled to be heard on the House floor this week. The Senate Bill 25001, this is the Colorado Voting Rights Act. This would permit an individual or organization to file suit against a city or town alleging voter suppression or voter dilution. This is a bill that I think CML is still scratching its head on because it's not applied uniformly. It would exclude state elections. It would exclude school district elections and special district elections as well. The only target of this legislation appears to be city and town elections. This bill passed committee last week on a vote of 3-2 and is now headed to the Senate Appropriations Committee. Let's see, the next one I will mention is House Bill 251169. This is the housing developments on the faith and educational land. This is the one that I spoke to you all a few meetings ago about this is the Yes in God's Backyard legislation. This would essentially allow any church or school property to have an end run around local zoning. So they could essentially skip the local entitlement process if the proposal is to build housing on school or church property. It passed the House committee last week and will be up for second reading by the House. Well, it was up for second reading apparently this afternoon on February 24th. I think I mentioned this during one of my earlier reports that there is no affordability criteria or requirement that's in the legislation currently. So that's something that I believe some of the opponents to this legislation are continuing to push the sponsors to include. Also, I think that there's a concern that, well, I mean, there's a big concern from cities and towns across the state by allowing any organization to skip the local zoning or land use approval entitlement process. There's a reason why towns and cities adopt comprehensive plans or master plans and decide where denser, housing development makes sense in their community. So that's something that CML is continuing to oppose. The Wireless Telecommunications Facilities Bill, House Bill 251056. I also mentioned this at a recent meeting. This would require local governments to process permits for wireless facilities within 90 days. And if a local government exceeds those shot clocks, the application is deemed automatically approved. That bill is also scheduled for second reading in the House this week. Finally, I will just give you a quick update on Senate Bill 25077, modifications to the Colorado Open Records Act. This is a bill that CML generally supports because it does extend the timeline for cities and towns to respond to core requests, introduces additional extenuating circumstances, and adds language addressing well, I think I mentioned this a few meetings ago, where this is the bill that actually allows a city or town to consolidate multiple requests that are submitted by the same party as one consolidated request for purposes of calculating the fee. There is a provision of this bill that includes an exemption for the press or media organizations. That the press or media organizations would remain subject to the existing timelines currently set forth in state law. That's something that CML is in a amend position on. So that concludes my quick little legislative update. Are there any questions on those 5 bills from any members of the board?
Questions or comments from Marcus?
No? Okay, and then Mayor Whitlow, I did also want to I do also have a attorney report as a portion of this agenda item number 11. So as a reminder, at the last board meeting on February 10th, the board properly convened an executive session pursuant to 24-6-4024B for a conference with the town attorney regarding specific legal questions regarding allegations made during public comment at the January 13th regular meeting, as set forth in the February 10th meeting minutes, which are included in your packet for this evening at page 10. The board moved, following the conclusion of the executive session, to instruct the town attorney to prepare a written or oral statement confirming that there is insufficient competent evidence to merit moving forward with any further investigation of the allegations, and to present the written or oral statement at tonight's regular meeting for the benefit of the record. That motion was seconded and approved by a vote of 7-0. So here is the oral statement that I have prepared tonight. The allegations that were made during the public comment at the January 13th meeting have been reviewed and discussed with the board. In my opinion, none of the allegations merit the expenditure of public funds to open a formal investigation based on a lack of competent evidence. This conclusion to not open any form of formal investigation is further supported by the fact that the board does not have jurisdiction over the allegations lodged at the January 13th meeting. The allegations include vague and unsubstantiated allegations tied to specific provisions of the Colorado Criminal Code, specifically sections 18.8.404 and 18.8.306 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. Enforcement of these statutory provisions lies with the district attorney for Weld County and not with the Board of Trustees or with my office as the town attorney. That concludes my statement on this matter. I will provide a summary of this statement to the town clerk for purposes of ensuring that the statement is properly reflected in the February 24th meeting minutes. As a final kind of attorney update or report for you, I would like to just note briefly that last week I shared with the town manager and also Chief Newbanks just some general guidance regarding the town police department's interaction with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and what is the police department's best course of action if it receives a request for assistance from ICE. If ICE requests MPD's assistance in a ICE raid or the holding arrest of an individual, the best course of action is to not get involved. The officers should politely decline the request and ask the federal agent to provide a warrant for the individual's arrest. Colorado statutes and the Colorado Constitution forbid local law enforcement from arresting or detaining any person for civil immigration purposes without a warrant signed by a judge, including at the request of ICE. And that's set forth in CRS 24, Article 76.6, Sections 101 and 102. In fact, assisting ICE without a warrant signed by a judge could significantly increase the risk of a lawsuit being brought against the town of Mead or individual officers. Chief Newbanks did inform me earlier today that there's really been very limited ICE activity within the town boundaries, but I just thought that I would pass this along to you all just so that you have a summary of the general guidance that I provided to the town manager and the chief, because you may get that question from a constituent at some point. So I just wanted to make sure you had that information. Happy to stand for any questions.
I have a question. Does that include if someone's detained for another reason and they happen to be on and they're not documented, would Mead hold them until ICE got there? Or does the judge get involved? I don't know how that process works, I guess.
Yeah, it's, and Chief may have some additional comments as well, but it's my understanding that unless there's been a warrant signed by a judge, holding that person without that arrest warrant would constitute probably a warrantless arrest and could be deemed unconstitutional, and therein would lie the risk for liability.
Even if they got in a car wreck and were at fault, or they broke into someone's house and were arrested for theft, there wouldn't be any interaction there.
So I think I can answer that. Appreciate the question. so the interaction there would be the same as if they were documented. They would either get a summons, if there was a reason to arrest them for a criminal charge. We don't hold anyone. We don't have a holding facility in Mead to do that anyway. But if there were a reason to transport them to jail, we would do that. And then any further detention for reasons of being undocumented would then fall subject to the county sheriff, not to Mead Police. So Mead Police would take the normal course of action. If that was to write a summons and release them, that's what we would do. We would not hold them solely based on the undocumented. Yeah.
Any other questions for Marcus? I have a comment on going back to the State House report today. There is and I just want to let everybody know what's going through. It's concerning water, and it will be hitting our code later, but it's called House Bill 251113. It's limiting turf and new residential development. So it's already moved past the committee. It's going to be heard on the House floor next week. So keep an eye on that, because it could change the code for you, Jason, and for your department. So there's a lot of things that are creeping up and down. Just as Friday, we did, 3 hours of all this jazz. And I don't know how many more days we have left, but it can't come soon enough. So thank you, Marcus.
Mayor, thank you for distributing the, I think you did, you emailed me the update or the summary from the CML Policy Committee from last Friday. So I appreciate that. And I believe that was distributed to all trustees as well via email this afternoon. So,
Yep. So that was distributed along with the small community hot topic item from Dr. Cog. So, and then later on, Mary will send out the CML Legislative Conference presentations too, so you all could see what's happening down there too. So thank you, Marcus. Appreciate it. Okay. We'll move on to our elected official reports. Do any of the trustees have anything to report? Okay. I have my update, but before I get there, in your packet, there is a write-up from about National League of Cities. National League of Cities is kind of a nationwide CML, kind of helps cities and towns focus on improving the quality of life for their towns and cities. Their mission is to advocate for and protect interests of cities and towns by influencing federal policy, strengthening local leadership, and driving innovation solutions. And in your packet, it shows that we were members from quite some time ago. The actual base would be $1,300 a year for us to be a part of the membership. It comes with a lot of benefits, and you can see it in your packet. There's different things that we could benefit from. So I'm bringing this up now since there's a lot of people that have asked why Mead is not a participant in this. So I'd like to get some feedback from the trustees on whether we should pursue this or not.
When did we fall out?
2013.
Do we know why we fell out in 13?
I'm not sure. Probably. I don't know. I don't
Yes,
know.
I know.
Oh, no. I'm not going to go there.
Don't go there.
No.
Who gets the information? Do we
All
as
of
the
us.
board or
Yes.
all staff?
All of us. All of
What's
us.
the benefit to?
Yeah, all of us. And we have opportunity to do webinars, just like this. It's just a national kind of community kind of outreach. And CML is more of a Colorado based. And also SURSA is one of the member pools of NLC. And also all 2,700 cities across the nation are partners with them. So, I mean, I think it's a good
It's a good thing.
it's a good thing. So, I mean, it helps us advocate for things that might help us legislatively, federally, and try to get us on, and there's a lot of things you guys can learn. There's networking things in that packet. You could see where all the different things that we could do to help us, move forward in a lot of different things and finding grants and things like that. So, I just want your feedback before
I
we
think it's
either.
well worth $1,300 for what we get back.
Jeremiah, you read the packet? Okay. Okay, good. David?
Yep.
Okay. Trish?
Yeah.
Is it 1,300 or is it 952?
So 952 would go to the end of the September or September 1st, right, Mary? And then starts.
Prorated for
Yeah,
this year.
right. And then it starts September 1st of the year.
I missed
Yeah.
that little
Yeah.
line. Okay. Oh,
Uh-huh.
I'm for it. I think it's invaluable to be able to.
Network.
Yeah.
Networking
And
is great.
just the
Information.
yeah, information and education that comes from it.
Okay. Brad? Brad? Okay.
I'm indifferent.
You
Okay.
need a motion
I'm not sure.
to spend.
Mark, no. Thumbs up.
I just think we just need general direction.
Yeah.
And then we'll have it included, the actual approval it'll be included on payables on a future meeting, so it would be there.
Okay. Thank you guys very much. All right. So you of course, we just talked about this email policy committee. It's in your inbox, the small community hot topic presentation, which is really cool as for United Power microgrids. So I thought that was very interesting about how we're in their district, and it was interesting to go through that. Also, the legislative conference materials will be sent out by Mary. I did participate in the RTC, which is the Regional Transportation Commission, all the Dr. Cog executive and the member board. Let's see, the legislative conference, the policy committee. So a lot of downtown Denver stuff. This Saturday is Coffee with the Mayor. I invite you all to participate and the community to come over to Public Works at 8 to 10. And then this Friday, I have just an update I do once a quarter, hopefully once a quarter, to get everybody on the get the same information. But I have it with all the principals of all the schools and the area. They have a new area supervisor that will be joining us. So I just want to let you know that we'll be just doing some updates, but that is all for me. Thank you very much. Okay. Next on the agenda is our executive session. I would like to take a break before we go into that, and we will have a 5-minute recess before we go into the executive session.
I'm sorry, Mayor, do you want to do the motion to go into executive session and then take a break?
However you want to, Marcus. Okay.
I think because we're going to be going into executive session, we're actually gonna be holding it in the small conference room here. So it might make more sense to do the motion, have that the results of the motion and then take a break.
Okay. Go ahead. All right.
I move that we go into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 4B and 24-6-402 4E for conference with the town attorney regarding specific legal questions regarding the 2015 boundary intergovernmental agreement with the town of Firestone, and to develop strategy for negotiations and instruct negotiators regarding renewal or extension of the IGA.
Second.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Trustee Babcock,
Yes.
trustee Shranz,
Yes.
trustee Hagan,
Yes.
trustee Crane,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris,
Yes.
trustee Adams,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries. The time now is 8:52, and we will turn off the recording and adjourn to executive session. We will restart the recording for the executive session. Thank you. The time now is 9:39 and the executive session has concluded. The participants in the executive session were Mayor Pro Tem Harris, trustee Adams, trustee Babcock, trustee Crane, trustee Hagan, trustee Schranz, town manager Helen Mickelbrink, town attorney Marcus Miskaskin, administrative services, community development director Jason Bradford. There are no executive session actions tonight.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Are there any further actions tonight besides asking for an adjournment? I just have one thing that I want to bring up that I forgot to bring. I'm going to have office hours on Mondays from 10 to 12. So I just wanted to let you know that it'll be coming out in the media. So I've been asked to have more of an outreach. A lot of Saturdays cannot be for other people that have other commitments. So I just want to let you guys know that. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Trustee Adams,
Yes.
trustee Crane,
Yes.
Trustee Babcock,
Yes.
trustee Hagan,
Yes.
trustee Shran.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harris.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. The February 24th, 2025 regular meeting of the Board of Trustees is now adjourned at 9:40. Thank you very much.